you.
Stand by. Three, two, one.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Ashland Planning Board meeting of Thursday, September 28th, 2023. Just a note to everyone that the meeting is being broadcast and recorded. So first on our agenda tonight is, as always, is the clerk's report. Kate, report for tonight?
Yes, Madam Chair, we have received 3 public correspondence since the last planning board meeting. 2 of those were responded to by the town planner as specifics, and 1 of them was responded to by the clerk on behalf of the board.
Thank you. All right, next on the agenda is public comment. We will open it up for public comment, and Peter, can you manage the process?
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Currently, we have no hands raised here in the audience. However, we have 2 virtual hands raised. First being Mr. Mark Dasoni. Mr. Mark Dasoni, can you please unmute yourself and state your name and address?
Okay, thank you. Mark Sony, 49 Hawthorne Road, Ashland, Mass. I am here to say to the representative of the comprehensive plan that I enjoyed it thoroughly. I was at the meeting, the meet the consultant meeting, and got involved. And that helped me formulate what my thinking is of the board itself, of the comprehensive plan members themselves. And I know they made a good choice with getting those consultants. But to the planning board, they still haven't come up with the answers yet of what is the goal for the town. Have you had time to think about that, or are you not willing to answer? That's it.
Thank you, Mr. Dasoni. The second person with a hand raised is Amanda. Amanda, can you please step forward and state your name and address?
Hi guys, my name is Amanda Walsh and my address is 107 Pine Hill Road. So I just wanted to make a quick suggestion regarding the MBTA housing project. I didn't know if you guys were considering putting together maybe a survey, and distributing that to the community via like social media or the weekly newsletter. I just made the observation, like I've seen a couple of open houses and there are so many people looking for starter homes. And I just feel like, this MBTA community, action would be a great opportunity to, maybe look into townhouses or, these millennials that, don't want to live in apartments and they want to, have a different housing situation, have maybe like a little yard. I just think it's a really great community a really great initiative to explore that. And I think a survey would be great to hear from the community and see if, that's what they're looking for and, what type of housing options they would like. So just want to make that quick comment. Thanks, guys.
And I'm just going to make a quick response to that, just in regard to housing, because in 2 ways. One, I think housing is going to be looked at through the comprehensive plan process, which is one of the things from the beginning that was going to be looked at. So know that it's being looked at through that process. The MBTA zoning districts also we'll be having, once we kind of really get into all the requirements that are put to us by the state, we'll both be discussing it with joint meetings between the planning board and select board, and then there'll be forums and things like that to kind of explain it on a more general basis. Right. So we're kind of just at the beginning part of exploring possibilities for Ashland to meet those state requirements. Okay. Great. Any more hands raised? No? Okay. And also before we get started, I just wanted to let everyone know that our fifth member, Anna Tesmaninsky, will be joining us later in the meeting. She is traveling. And our new associate member, Amanda Hayes, also had a previous travel commitment, so she is actually in flight right now and couldn't make this initial meeting, but she should be with us next time. So on that note, we can start our first major agenda item of the night is a continuing discussion with the Sustainability Committee regarding the development of a new tree bylaw. Margie, obviously you are here. Do you have others that are coming in online or that we should make sure we note? Okay. And you have a presentation, is that? Okay, great.
Can I see it on here, or shall I just talk from here?
It would be good to go to the microphone.
Right, I got that part, but,
Oh, that machine's not part of the Zoom.
okay, but this is.
That is, the mic is. Right, Paul?
Yeah, if you have a presentation, or do you have it?
Well, it's right there.
Oh, okay.
Do I need to state my name and address?
Sure.
Okay. Margie Gassell, 8 Adams Road. Okay, so you can hear me fine, right? Okay. So what I'd like to talk with you about tonight is the situations that would trigger the tree bylaw. Next slide. Can I do that? Who's going to do that? Okay. So the Sustainability Committee's goal is to preserve as many trees, especially wooded areas in town, as feasible. And as I said, we would like to consider the different situations that would call for a review under the tree bylaw. And I want to point out that we very much recognize the complexity of the regulatory issues, and we're super appreciative of your advice and counsel and ultimately your approval. Next. So in the draft document that I believe you all have seen, these were the triggers for the bylaw. The first one being site plan review. The second is site alteration special permit, then 40B, and last subdivision. So next slide. So I made some notes on this slide about the content of site plan review in the bylaw, kind of for myself. And what I want to run by you is, if I understand it correctly, that it has mostly to do with commercial and industrial construction. Also parking, also an expansion of parking. And then the last one, building permits, including 6 or more parking spaces. So my question is, does that refer to multi-family dwellings?
Yeah, I mean, I think it can really, it looks to note like a project that probably has a certain scale to it, like a certain size.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
that-
it could be commercial. Is multifamily considered commercial?
It is per the code, yeah.
Okay, all right, next slide. And then site alteration special permit applies to clearing of over 5,000 square feet or grading over 100 cubic yards. And there is a list of exemptions, and I've just sort of summarized, for example, removal of hazardous trees and routine maintenance are within the exemptions. But the one I'm a little confused about is clearing of land zoned residential when such parcel is included in a submission for development to the planning board. And what I don't understand is, if you look down below under intent and purpose, one of those is to limit land clearing and alteration of natural topography. And then it says prior to site plan, preliminary plan, and/or definitive plan approval. So I'm a little confused about the timing and the exemption. I don't understand what the exemption means.
I'm not sure, given that none of us were around when this was written, I'm not sure we do either. Peter, what in your, I mean, what does that line mean? I think it's a very good point to ask. Does that mean that the land can be cleared. Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure.
Let me see, I'm sorry, I'm slowly.
It's this point, site alteration special
Yeah.
permit exempt, you're exempt clearing of land zoned residential.
When such a parcel is included in a submission for development to the planning board. So in my eyes, I would say that if you are already in front of the planning board for such a for a site for, in that instance, I would say a subdivision, that subdivision is gonna include a lot of earthwork, right? A roadway, roadway development, drainage basin development. And so if you are filing for that, such type of an application within the planning board, then therefore you are not filing for a site plan alteration. Because that permit is so big and intense, right? For that roadway development, that you're not putting a special permit on top of that application.
Okay, I think that makes sense, because I actually looked up, I was trying to get a sense for myself about how big is 5,000 square feet. And actually, this building footprint, the footprint is about 5,000 square feet. It's 52 by like 104, which puts it just to get an idea of what 5,000 square feet is. So obviously, a subdivision would be much, much larger. And so this site alteration special permit would be,
The site alteration special permit is applies to really land clearing indoor grading, right? On a much condensed scale, right? And the major thing is to make sure that you're not pushing more water onto your neighbor, right? From a stormwater standpoint, you're not causing a hazard to any abutting properties. However, when you do a subdivision development, a roadway permitting, you could be clearing and/or manipulating, grading, 100,000 square feet of material indoor land area. And so therefore, if you're gonna do this huge exorbitant project that may include 10, 20, 50, 40 subdivision lots, then you're exempt from that site alteration special permit because you're doing such a greater development.
and because those issues are going to be looked at in terms of the subdivision permit, they're being
Correct.
looked at already, is what Peter is saying.
Correct.
Not that they're being ignored, you can cut down whatever you want, but they're being looked at already under the umbrella of another permit.
Yeah.
So it seems like, though, that, to be very clear, needs to say our subdivision bylaw, blah, blah, and that would clear it up. Because it
Yeah.
kind of, what Peter's saying, when you reread it, makes sense, but it does not say that. And that would be potentially some misunderstanding with a developer, not us, if it got in front of us. There can't be a
Yeah.
misunderstanding if we refer to the subdivision.
Agreed. Yeah.
So that seems like a definite cleanup, easy.
I 100% agree with you, but I agree with you. The interpretation of the planning board or whoever, when this bylaw went into effect or the last time it was manipulated, it could have been clear to them, but
Yeah.
today, yeah, it could be ironed out a little bit better. But that's the way I would implement and/or understand that development.
And just to add a little bit more to that, because of things we've discussed before, in a subdivision, there are very few things that the planning board can do, as long as the subdivision is following all the rules, to not approve a subdivision,
That's
right?
correct.
But
Yeah.
that's just the subdivision, that's not the work on each property.
That's correct.
So the subdivision is the one thing on paper. It's not the lot releases or anything like that.
No, so the two things, so a subdivision development, the definitive subdivision development is really for the permitting of the development of the roadway, right? The roadway in particular. When you start looking at the subdivision regulations, right, which is another document excluded from the zoning bylaws, the subdivision regulations are the regulations that the town adopts, very similar to zoning. Actually, the planning board adopts the subdivision regulations. Any changes to the subdivision regulations can go through the planning board. They don't have to go through town meeting just a note on that point. But the subdivision regulations spell out how the town wants that road to be built. That roadway has to be 22 feet across. That roadway needs to have vertical granite curbing. That roadway has to have Cape Cod berm. That roadway has to have a vertical granite curbing at the drainage, at the street drains. Radiuses, grades, all those elements that lay out a safe and, I would say, harmonious street, including stormwater to street trees, right? And all those elements are within the subdivision regulations. Now, if a developer comes in and says, I would like to develop this piece of property, and I'm gonna meet every subdivision regulation that the town of Ashland has, and is asking for no waivers, yes, it is very difficult, and the town does not have any, I would say, therefore, right to deny that subdivision, because it is the right of that property owner to develop his property. Now, he is developing a roadway to do really one thing in particular, is to create buildable lots. A buildable lot needs square footage and frontage, right? The roadway creates frontage for the developer to create buildable lots. And so that's the way it all kind of is in a nutshell woven together.
So, but is it unknown that after that process, so a person gets the subdivision approval, they still have to have building permits?
Correct.
And for each of those buildings, and this is the question, at which time the planning board can look at what is intended as far as how the lots are going to be cleared? Is there?
You know what, I looking at the interpretation, I would look to town council to talk that through before I give you a full answer
Okay.
on film.
Yeah, so I think another point related to that, though, so let's just say, Mr. So-and-so made the subdivision, and then Ms. Jurassic buys a lot. We've already tentatively, again, nothing's 100% inked in stone, but said, for now, for this round, private property. So now, whatever we make Kate Jersey's lot, I can clear cut it. So that's a automatic loophole in our thinking, right? Usually they don't go that way, though. They don't necessarily just divide out and sell it to you and you and you. But yes, maybe, right? So if the intent is to not have clear cutting in subdivisions, we have a lot of thinking to do, starting with town council, but.
Yeah, I understand the interpretation. It's a very good way to look at it, right? The subdivision creates the roadway. Does this interpretation of the bylaw, does that include the entire perimeter of land that the subdivision is creating? And I think that's where we're going. Mm-hmm. Or is this interpreting that the roadway itself? Now, from a practical standpoint, for the Conservation Commission, for example, the Conservation Commission for any subdivision.
You can take a seat in between while we discuss this point if you want. Hate to leave you standing there.
The Conservation Commission, they're going to permit the entire project under one project, right? And then they say the subdivision is 20 lots, right? And 10 out of those 20 lots fall within 100 feet of a wetland, right? Then the developer is going to have to come back, and for each house, right, and for each lot, then they have to refile with the Conservation Commission for the development of each house within 100 feet of that wetland. Now, I think that's this is where we're going, is to say, okay, if that's the case, then and you're looking to grade over greater than 5,000 square feet, what's the interpretation when you're coming in from a lot-by-lot basis?
And what would be the mechanism? Because I think we're strongly considering to not allow that. So it's like kind of two parts to that.
Yeah.
But I think that was part of the discussion in the previous time, and I think we were trying to make a distinction between a large development, a commercial development, and private property. And that was a point of discussion that needed to be clarified, because that's something that everybody is concerned about. In Kate's example, once you buy the lot, first of all, it would be unlikely, I mean, if you're gonna move that kind of land, it would be probably for the construction of your house. And then if it's more than X, I guess would have to go through this. But once the lot is there, unless the new bylaw limits what you can do in your own private lot, you, at this point in time, you can do whatever you want. Right?
Yeah, so it's sort of a loophole if we stick to that, and there may be, I mean, that's through town council, if it's a new development, right, that may be the way to tie it.
But by the time the development is developed, I mean, the lots are buildable, and they are, and the wetlands will be flagged and approved by
Of course.
the Conservation Commission.
Yep.
So really, all that's left is building houses in that subdivision,
Correct.
right? But at the point when you're making the subdivision here, the way it reads, you're gonna have to go through all this review.
Yeah.
So it would be redundant to also apply for these special permit, because it's a more localized item. If you have, say, a property with two houses, and you're trying to change it or whatever, two lots, and then you need to move this amount of square feet of land, then would that be the point where you have to go through these site alteration because it's just a smaller scope?
Yeah, and I think the number one thing here is, and I think it's a very important point, is that the planning board and the town have to look at how this has been interpreted in the past from a historical standpoint, right? Because there's been a lot of subdivisions, a lot of developments that are done, right, previously, and how was this bylaw interpreted in the past? And that has to be taken into account before the board would consider a new interpretation and going into a different direction.
So I would say, I 100% agree with that, and it sounds like we actually need a fair bit of town council input, but changing, if we propose to change that we're not specifically, like, we're entitled to change our bylaws or propose changes to our bylaws, I guess.
Yeah.
So I think there's a distinction, and I don't want to get caught up, because if something was the past and we're trying to, I mean, I'm just going to be clear, I see this as an improvement, I'm supporting, trying to get a bylaw to bring to town meeting, so I assume it will be changes, right? And I don't want to lose sight of that, I guess.
Yeah, but I want to ask Margie, I mean, what we're talking about a change to the bylaws by default, right? The investigation is the tree bylaw and what's going to entail. So how does the sustainability committee see this differentiation between private and commercial?
Yeah, so
Because if
you've
you
gotten
can
ahead
address
of me. I'm thinking that perhaps we should move forward
In the presentation.
to the subdivision slide.
Okay, continue.
Yeah, so this is the question we were bringing to you, is there's the portion that has to do with road construction, and that's not so complicated, but the second part, the development of the lots, that's where it gets a little hairy. So it sounds like we need to gather more information. And in terms of where we are on that, I think we're kind of divided. Some members think it's important because we're trying to preserve trees that those lots cannot be clear-cut. And others are concerned about the impact it might have on the success of passing the bylaw, because it starts to move over into the residential realm. So, yeah, we have to work this out somehow.
Yeah, and just to note, if I can add to you, in looking at the slide, there's a couple things. Number one, the subdivision is for the roadway, right? And it creates the buildable lots. And working with Margie and Samantha, or from our sustainability coordinator, we've also kind of found out, and I just kind of want to make note of it, what other towns are doing, right? And in the other packet, I'm not going to bring it up on the screen, but there's this sample tree plan, right? And I just kind of want to make note of it. And I'm happy to actually bring it up on screen. I just have to jump to a different PowerPoint. But to our research, it seems that most towns are moving in the direction of requesting a tree plan, right? And so, and for this instance, when you create a buildable lot, you also have what's known as a buildable envelope.
A
And your
buildable what?
envelope.
Okay.
And your buildable envelope is going to allow you to place your house, right? Your building envelope respects the dimensional regulations within your zone, within your zoning setbacks, right? And so as you develop your lot and or any new lot, or any, if you manipulate anything in that lot, you have the right to plant a tree in that yard. You have also the right to take a tree down in your quote-unquote building envelope. But it's outside the building envelope. They're calling the tree area, the tree protection zone, which is going to be the area which is protected by your dimensional setbacks. That's the area where where a lot of communities are looking to, and have already done, look to protect trees. So that's in your rear yard setback, your front yard setback, but also in your side yard setbacks. And so any manipulation of the trees within those setbacks are now under the jurisdiction of community bylaws.
But most of and this is going down the road a little further, but like most of the setbacks are that, they're the house setback, they're not the accessory dwelling setback or the pool setback or the patio setback. None of that counts, right? And so, yeah, so it gets complicated.
It's not a lot of space we're dealing with, so. Our setbacks are not significant. I'm not saying it's not going to protect any trees, but I don't think it's protecting a lot of trees if that's the direction we go.
Yeah, I'm just like, I don't know the answer. I'm just trying to get to the question
Yeah.
still, I guess.
The setbacks are for a structure. A pool is considered a structure. A patio is not. A structure, a house is, right? A driveway is not, right? And so you have to kind of go down this line to say, okay, where do you draw the line, right? You're adding another restriction onto a private you're adding a restriction to private property. And so that's just something to note. But, communities similar to Ashland, and you can look through this comparison, this is the direction they have been going. And I just kind of wanted to make note of that, just for food for thought.
And that would make sense. That will kind of start touching on what Margie was saying. That is something that could be viewed in a number of ways, positively by some and negatively by others. Because what is to say that if you have a property and let's say that there's some trees in that zone that you simply don't like or would like to modify, there's one avenue, which is this one, right? To say, no, you can't.
Yeah.
There's another avenue that gives incentives to, okay, you can, but you have to replace it in kind somewhere. So to give choice and freedom than as opposed to saying, no, you can't. And if you touch that, we're not sending an inspector. That is when it becomes a lot more of a difficult conversation, I think.
Yeah. If you really look at these comparisons, that's how each of these have been. They're very generic. It talks about the diameter of the trees and kind of the penalty, if you will, depending on the size. But other than that, it seems like there seems to be a very similar pattern in all these examples that have been shared. It's very generic. It doesn't go into that depth of what we are proposing here about that 5,000 square feet, because there's probably a lot of things that will fight with that logic. So
I think that the 5,000 square feet is a site alteration, right? And I think what Margie's proposing is if you trigger, you're looking at the triggers, right? So you're saying, okay, what would trigger the town of Ashland to look and or do it, you look into this tree bylaw, right? And so they're saying, okay, if the site alteration permit is applied for, well, are you taking down any trees? And what trees are you going to take down? Because you're doing significant grading on your site. So it's that one permit would lead to the next question. When I did my research on it, a lot of these communities historically, and I would say in the past couple of years, face tear downs. And so there's been a lot of tear downs of post-war housing. And so they're in the urban environment, they're on the 128 belt. And so they're tear downs of your post-war Campanelli split levels, right? That were built in the 1950s. and property values have risen, and the house has fallen into a disrepair, say. And so a developer is coming in and taking the house down and replacing it with a 4,000 square foot house. And in doing so, and doing kind, they're taking down some whole, some 50-year-old trees that have been on that property. And so that's what I've kind of come to find in this research. Some of the other triggers that are mentioned in the comparison are anytime someone is applying for a building permit, that's going to increase your gross floor area by 50% or more. That's going to trigger the adoption and/or submittal of a tree plan, right? And so they're saying if you're going to get your lot surveyed with a plot plan and created to implement an addition of, just for the mere facts, if you have a 2,000 square foot house and you're going to put a 1,000 square foot addition on, you're going to have to get a site plan and do all that work as well. Well, now you're going to also go and measure all the trees on your property, and we want to know which trees you're taking down with your 1,000 square foot addition. And are they within the building envelope, or are they outside the building envelope? And so it's kind of,
So that you would have to, it's not that you're gonna measure it, you're gonna have to engage a licensed professional to do it for you and pay for that.
the applicant, the homeowner would have to do that, and then they would be submitting that material to the town of Ashland. And so there's those are the two real common threads I've picked up on what this is and what communities are adopting. And everyone can take a look for themselves through the comparison stuff, but that's where my mind is going when these communities have adopted tree bylaws.
So I didn't have this particular discussion on the agenda for tonight, and it seems important, and I'm wondering if I need to add it to a future agenda so that we can determine if we're gonna deal with that situation or not in the tree bylaw. Does it sound reasonable?
Yeah, I think absolutely, because they're kind of on, questions that we have.
So, you got me all out of order, but that's
Sorry,
okay.
so I
That's okay.
I was just going to ask, what did you want to talk about tonight? We were just kind of coming up with questions as we.
Yeah, I was trying to keep it limited so that, we wouldn't take too much time. So, can we go backwards and come back to this later?
I'm sorry.
Go back. So, just to summarize in terms of subdivisions, we do want to address the problem with you about development of the lots, how we're going to approach that.
Yeah, I just don't have any.
We don't have to do it now.
Don't have any
I'm-
answers until we understand what we're allowed to do and not allowed to do.
Right. Okay, and then go back one more before we move to the end. We skipped this one. So 40B, that one. So Samantha talked with Lisa Mead to help us understand, and now I fully understand that if you file for 40B, you can disregard all local regulations. And she said that we could make an exemption for them, but we don't have to because they can exempt themselves. But what I'm wondering is the tree bylaw cannot apply unless we have 10% affordable housing. So let's suppose we get there. Does that mean that we should include this in the tree bylaw in the event that we get to that place?
I mean, I would
Do you
say
see-
yes, because we don't need to, it's our goal to meet 10 or more, right? As a community,
Right.
we kind of keep stumbling, but I haven't heard pushback that we don't want to do that, right? So someday, hopefully sooner, we'll get there. So the bylaw can say upon,
Okay,
right?
all right.
For sure. And then, I mean, I'm not a lawyer, so if Lisa Mead says yes, but that's not my read that 40B completely gets to override all your zoning. I know that's commonly how we say it, because that is a version, but I read some stuff today from the state that it actually didn't say that, and I didn't get to find the tree bylaw specifically, but I don't think it's as blatant as none of your rules apply, so we should probably dig into that a little bit.
Okay.
But I would say absolutely write it so that it's when we're at 10% it applies.
Okay. Okay, well, that was easy. Okay, now we can go to the last slide. So I made sort of a work plan for moving forward, and I listed the topics that we want to discuss with you, and I left some blank spaces because I probably forgot some others might come up. But this is what I have so far, and I sort of estimated, well, I didn't estimate, I just picked the dates that I think you're meeting, although I might have scheduled this on Thanksgiving, I'm not sure. Or I might have skipped it. Looks like I skipped it.
Thanksgiving.
Yeah, you skipped it.
Skipped what?
Thanksgiving.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's good.
I can see there's
That's on
only
the
one date
24th,
in
yeah, we
November.
won't
And
be-
then I
we
don't know
won't
what
be
happens
meeting.
at the end of the year on December 28th, but
So I appreciate getting like specifics. I would say right now, we need to put the subdivision back on. We know we're not
yes, I
solving that.
agree.
So in the work plan like that, and then even though if I'm remembering correctly, the board was not opposed to private residential, but we thought for town meeting, but the conversation tonight kind of opened that back up a little bit, right?
I don't think the board was in favor either. It was just a discussion.
No, I'm not trying to, I think, I agree, it was reasonably settled, we weren't gonna probably pursue that now, but I thought the conversations tonight sort of opened that up again as a way, because of these private lots that a developer sold, those kind of things. And then Peter said the communities that are going toward that are about private lots, so,
Well, yeah, but Margie said it as well. Once you start going that road, you better involve the entire community
Yeah.
to really, otherwise you're going to do a lot of work to fail, right? And what's the point on that?
Yeah, I think it's a matter of scale, right? It's not intended to be, hey, there's a tree in the middle of my yard that keeps dropping, it's healthy, but it keeps dropping branches and I have young kids, right? It's not about one tree, it's about, I'm taking down this house and I'm building I'm really making a much bigger change. We're not trying to.
And that clarity is critical.
Yeah, and it's a fine line to try to describe, right, to, adequately. And I also, I guess I took all of these as almost like these are times when discussing these issues, because not sure they'll just be resolved when we move on, because you tend to loop back, right? And I wasn't here for the last discussion, though I did watch a good part of the tape. And I really had a question, and we don't have to go back on this today. I just wanted to make a point about town property. And first of all, I agree that the conversation was about the town setting a good example. And I think should be obvious that we're setting a good example. That said, it gets again kind of tricky, because if you look at the recent town projects, the public safety building and the school, those sites, which both cut down a good deal of trees, I don't know how many, but had other important reasons for being cited where they were, right? Now, if trees was the only consideration, yeah, maybe they would have been cited differently, but it was only one of many important considerations, right? So how does that weigh in? And then, because it's not a matter of just choosing a different home or whatever. And then how does it weigh in if you're taking down trees and say you have to, and we haven't gotten to the point about talking about payment in lieu of cutting down trees or whatever. But how does that work when really we are both like in
The
terms of the
payer
school,
and the
right?
payee.
Exactly. It's like, okay, I'll take my money from this jar and I'll just put it in this jar, but I own both jars.
But
Right, and so how do we think about that,
Well, I will use the way I'm trying to process the example, and I think the direction that the last conversation was kind of intended is at the essential fairness of when you apply a regulation or you put a new regulation on the community. And yeah, the town may own property and build a school, and they would have to do that. And the considerations of, yeah, we're doing something important will also apply to a private person. A private person would say, yeah, but this is important to me. So why is that different? So if the town is going to apply that to the community, I personally am really in favor of the town should be, have at least the same, if not more onerous requirements to set the example and say, okay, then when the town decides to do a project, then maybe it's not there, but they will have to plant trees in some other place, just like a person would have to also replace in kind.
Yeah, and I get that, you know, I think less so in terms of I think the site kind of depends, right? But again, in terms of the trees, we just have to understand that, you know, we, like, when it goes to town meeting and we ask we are the residents, that we're asking them for more money because we're taking down trees to plant the trees in somewhere. It's just about being honest and transparent and clear that we, all the townspeople and all the residents, are paying that bill. That's, you know.
Yeah, I absolutely. But the other part of that conversation is really how are we going to help the town or whoever is the entity in the town to have a real budget for this, for tree replacement. We talked with DPW once. They don't have a budget to take out a tree and replace it or take out the stump. Well, that has to be resolved, and maybe this change is a way to resolve it. So some of the budget in the town is going to have to account for that, right?
I just want to make a note. I think our member Anna has a point, not a point, but she wanted to add a comment. So Anna, can you please unmute yourself and introduce yourself?
Yes, Peter, can you hear me okay?
Can you speak up a little bit?
Sure. Is this better? Can you hear me now?
Loud and clear.
Okay. All right, you guys. I apologize for not being there in person, and I had some technical issues, but I did hear, I would say, almost everything in the entire discussion. And I just wanted to add 3 points to the discussion. One is I keep thinking, you know, what is our goal? Like, what are we actually trying to achieve? Because in all honesty, we, the planning board, together with the sustainability folks, we are not going to be able to figure out what will the majority of the town of Ashland vote for at town meeting. And so I don't think it's our job to come up with that perfect bylaw. I think it's our job to come up with a few options and present them at town meeting and be able to explain the pros and cons of them so that the community can make a good decision, right? And so I think if we sort of figure out what our actual goal is, it's going to make our jobs a lot easier because it seems like we're like aiming for that perfect answer. And I just don't think that's our job. We're not town meeting, we're not the whole community, but we can be really, really good at coming up with options. So I don't know if that's helpful to folks.
Just to be clear, like, I think we can do that in terms of offering forums before there's a warrant, but once a warrant is in front of town meeting, it can't be changed like that or voted this one or that one. The warrant has to express what is being voted for. So, but that discussion can happen in forums way in advance, so we know which way, so we have a warrant that will hopefully reflect what the people want.
I think that's accurate. You could, however, have amendments prepared in theory as well. So there are ways to creatively achieve the same results. But you're right, Tricia. The smoother, better way is to air out some of these possibilities in advance. But I think if we kind of agree that that's our job, it's going to make this process a little easier versus, ooh, we have to figure out what that perfect solution is. My second point is, you know, this interesting idea of like, how do we look at how other communities are doing this? And I keep thinking, okay, what about our own reality? Like right now in Ashland, today, we know, hopefully, what are our vulnerable areas that could confront tree removal, right? And so in theory, we should assess it fairly quickly so that we understand in this effort, what are we actually talking about? Meaning, what is left, right? And then once we know what's left, then we can be better informed as to how to focus this. That's one way to do it. So it's not that I don't care what other communities are doing, but at this point, we have clear cut some good chunks of our properties for multi-family housing, and I think we need to kind of start there. What's left to clear cut in the same fashion, and maybe begin there. And that's like a simple start. And then we can have a more complicated conversation of private property. But my recommendation would be, let's start with the easy stuff. What is actually left to clear cut big chunks? I don't think there's that much left from my personal view of Ashland. And then lastly, the point of incentives for private landowners. I'm sure many of you have heard about the beautiful tree in front of the funeral home at the corner of, 135 in Maine. And some of the Facebook traffic and attention that has drawn. And that got me thinking about how do we create positive relationship with more private landowners who maybe have that one historic tree. So even if we don't regulate that one tree, we could use the clear cutting commercial type of development as a way to create a fund, like a tree fund, that can then offer protection and incentive to some of those very, very beautiful and special trees that we ID, recognize, that we know are in private property. So it's not that we're going to require private landowners to protect that special tree right next to the funeral home, as an example. But we might have a fund ready that provides some support if that tree is damaged or needs to come down and can actually be replanted. So those are the 3 points I wanted to make. Thank you.
While we're paying attention to people who are not here in person, maybe I see some hands raised. Maybe we should open it up to public comment.
Sure, thank you. I see two public comments. Number first would be Mr. Joel Arbeitman. Mr. Joel Arbeitman, can you please unmute yourself and state your name and address?
Hi, just turning on the audio and video here. Joel Arbeitman, Woodridge Lane. I have a number of comments. First, I haven't had a chance to read the proposal at all, and I would like to do that. So I don't know exactly how this is framed or structured, but I would very much like to emphasize that what's sitting behind this isn't just that we appreciate the foliage or it makes our town prettier, which are both important, but that we have a catastrophic, I mean, I can't find any hyperbole that would go too far when we talk about the risk that we all, I believe, are seeing very clearly with the threat of climate change. 6 of the 9 tipping points that the UN has identified have now been passed, and the others are soon to topple. I mean, they're not talking about there could be some droughts or it might be kind of warm in Ashland. They're talking about the end of life on the planet. I mean, I can't think of anything greater. So my starting point for talking about this is, does the mission here make it just painfully clear how critical this is, and that we need to bend over backwards and do all we possibly can within reason, to be as effective with this effort as we possibly can. Having said that, I have a few questions and comments. First, I just want to really thank Margie and the Sustainability Committee and the Planning Board for taking this seriously. It's such an unbelievably important topic. A number of points I want to make very quickly, and I'm sure there's plenty of more discussion to come on all of these, and that there's a lot of nuance to all of this that needs to be ironed out. One, I was a little bit concerned, maybe not clear, about the discussion about subdivisions. I thought I heard perhaps Peter made the statement something to the effect of once an applicant complies with the subdivision regulations, there's really not too much leverage for the town. And there was some focus, if I wasn't fully understanding, but about putting in a road. Well, my understanding is that when somebody wants to put in a new road, whether it's a subdivision or any other road, that's a public road, that the town has certain standards that have to be met. There's a certain thickness of asphalt or the grading, or there's got to be the proper drainage, or maybe curbing or striping or whatever it is. There are all kinds of regulations. And I'm not really clear why this couldn't be an additional regulation talking about, the subdivision and clearing it and the impact on the trees. One question I had with regard to this whole process that the Sustainability Committee has identified, I'm a little bit concerned that all of the talk here seems to revolve around what planning board actions would or would not trigger some type of tree bylaw review. The concern I have is, and maybe I'm not fully understanding again, that it seems to me that if I own, let's say I own a 200 or 300 acre lot in Ashland, and I have not yet applied to the planning board for anything. It's just my lot. Do I have a right to go and clear cut it and sell off the wood? So I'm not, there is, you know, all of the triggers here seem to be based on a subdivision application or a permitting type application of some kind. What if I'm not doing any of that? In knowing that I'm going to be submitting a development plan, let's say I just want to clear the lot and sell the wood, and then I put the subdivision plan in. What jurisdiction does the planning board have at that point? It's a concern. With regard to 40D, I guess I have a question, and I didn't see what the proposal was from the Sustainability Committee. It certainly would seem like if we tried to put restrictions on a developer who was going to come in under a 40B, that they might be able to override them and we maybe couldn't force them to comply. I'm not as clear as to whether that would also apply to fees and compensation. In other words, if we said every tree you cut down, you have to pay this much, we're not stopping them from cutting, we're making them either have mitigation or plant other trees. And a really good example, and the question is this a valid example, is wetland mitigation. So if a 40D wants to come in, but they're doing damage to the environment due to wetland issues in the community, they can, as I understand it, they can be permitted to develop other wetlands elsewhere in town, so that they don't have a totally free hand to just damage the local environment. Even 40D has to comply with the wetland regulations. Could we find a way to structure the tree bylaw so that similar impact could be held and the town would have some jurisdiction? One more quick one. There was some discussion, and I want to second kind of what both Anna and who else? I'm not sure who else said it. Tricia, I think. This business about we can't come up with the perfect bylaw. We should provide options. I don't think that we necessarily have to have an amendment process. I don't see why we couldn't give the residents the greatest voice by having a tree bylaw, proposing it, let's say, without the private property option, and then have a second bylaw that adds, that also extends the tree bylaw to private property. I'm not clear that there would be any restriction at town meeting from providing multiple options of something like that. And the last comment I have is that, and somebody was sort of talking about this, I'm trying to make it more explicit. I think that it would be very helpful to do a study of undeveloped land in the town, both large parcels and small residential parcels, and try to identify what percentage of the town's trees or what percentage of the town's acreage would be covered by the tree bylaw. Like, it would be nice to kind of quantify that between commercial and residential and large parcels versus small parcels and so on, so that as we're trying to define a bylaw, that we would have a little bit more data to back us up and understand what the impact on the loss of trees in town would be. That's it. Thank you very much. I greatly appreciate the time.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Well, we have one more person with their hand up. Ash, can you please state your name and address?
Yeah, thanks. Ashwanath Chandani, 10 Arbor Road, Ashtoname. I also chair the Sustainability Committee. I actually put my hand up more to answer the question of, what should our intent be? I think from a Sustainability Committee perspective, I think Joel put it quite well. It is about, one, achieving the net zero goal that the town set for itself, and to fight climate change. Trish, to your point, I think I love the idea of doing a survey. I think the goal is to try and protect tracts of land that are larger rather than individual trees. Certainly there's a place for historic trees and beautiful trees, and I think that's a very valid point. We should take a look at, but I think from our perspective, at least the underlying goal is to ensure that we don't see loss of tree coverage. That's already been happening at an extremely fast pace. A lot of my other points have already been made far more succinctly between Joel and Anna, so I'm just going to give the time back and not waste additional time. Thank you.
Mr. Dissoni, I see your hand raised. Can you please add a short comment?
Short comments. Don't know if I can be short. I can be medium. I'm thinking that this bylaw is a needed idea that to show forth that town committees and developers realize that nobody took fair shots of how to handle tree situations before they actually buy the sites. And I'm understanding that through the planning board and site review committee, that's the first step to get those questions out there to make sure. And I'm saying that for the tree bylaw, that tree bylaw should be involved in site review committee so that the developer or whoever's going to work on the property has an idea of what the tree coverage and tree takings is going to be, and if is there any sort of options they you, the planning board and the developer and the bylaw can coincide and be working together on. But other than just bringing this as a bylaw up to date and stuff like that, it should understand that the trees don't have a say. It's the people who are trying to save that wants to have a say to bring out forth to save the trees. But it through site amendments and everything through the planning board's rules and regulations, that bylaw has got to be involved in the property standards of what there is left before the trees do come down, and for the bylaw to be updated. It's got to be for what the future is for the next time that can happen. And if it doesn't go through town meeting, then the public forums would be the best. And I think public forums should be part of the decision making too, because the public needs to know about trees themselves. Thank you.
All right, thank you. So what's our next step in this? I mean, I think the research about what other communities are doing, in no way obviously obligates us to do what another community is doing, but it gives us some place to start from, like, that kind of research, that ground knowledge, of what might happen. And I don't know, are there other examples, and I didn't make it all the way through that. Are there other examples of bylaws for the subdivisions, for municipal properties, for things that aren't?
So just to speak to that, we really haven't I really haven't come across it yet.
Okay.
I think the biggest things that I see are really I would say it's a reaction to the tear down replacement houses in the Metro West 128 belt communities. I do know that I believe it's Sherborne, Dover, Holliston are all interested, locally, regionally. All other communities are interested in developing a tree bylaw. I just think our conversations are happening at the same time. So to look for somebody, a next door neighbor per se, we don't really have that. I think we're still looking east to the communities that have already done it. Most of the communities that have done it are the Somerville, Arlington. I learned tonight that Linfield's another community up on the north side of 93. And then you have your Wellesley, your Lexington. I believe Concord has a tree bylaw. So I still would have to look into the other, surrounding communities. And then the other community is Northampton in the western part of the state. They do have a tree bylaw, but their tree bylaw protects 24-inch trees at diameter.
20.
Excuse me?
20.
20, I'm sorry. 20-inch trees. And so I think size different is a real difference is a real different factor on what type of communities one is. And so I think that's something, that's why the other day I brought those little diameters to kind of measure, okay, what's a major tree, what's a minor tree, what will be affected. And so I think the number one thing I take away is, I think there's a lot of research that has to be done on it. And there's other communities that have done tree plans, tree inventories and tree preservation plans. And that's an option that obviously a road the town could go down. But yeah, I think we're at the beginning and we're definitely not, nothing's in stone, I would say.
So next
Tricia,
step. Oh. Anna, is that you?
Tricia, could I make a suggestion for our consideration, which is this could be quite complex. I believe data is very, very important. But I also feel like starting out with something that like a starting step is also something we can do. In other words, if we believe in our community that the primary focus should be on large commercial style development, multifamily housing, or commercial built that's clear-cutting land, like the one that's right in front of my house, where a big chunk is just cleared up, right, ready to be developed. If that's our focus, that's a very narrow, doable thing that we probably do not need a ton of research on as far as what other communities have done, because it's a very simple, concise task. And then we could, just like Joel is suggesting, we could have bylaw 1 deals with those large chunks. Bylaw 2 maybe deals with a municipal chunk of that size. The town meeting folks have the opportunity to just discuss that issue alone, kind of large development and municipal. We save private for later. We see how town meeting reacts to these two topics, and based on that, we can come back for a third bylaw in the future once we've learned from the public's reaction to these two very concise, in my mind, very doable tasks.
Yeah, I think that might be a good idea to not do everything at one time, but I don't think we have a conclusion about what's the most important thing or the second most important thing. At least that didn't come across to me that was determined. And I think, and also in that whole process, there's certain part of the data is gathering what other towns have done. So I don't think we need to not spend time doing that. So I guess I would ask Margie, like, and the rest of the board, like, what's the next step here? It seems to me a small next step is that we've asked some important questions or you asked some important questions in your presentation, some of which we don't have answers for. And some of that involves Lisa Mead, some of it just involves taking a closer look to try to get those answers, whether they're low-hanging fruit or whether it's a more complex legal issue, I'm not sure. So that seems one obvious step, answer the questions we have. But Margie, what do you see as the next step, or the board who was part of the discussion the last time when I wasn't? So
Yeah, I need to process everything that happened tonight, so it's hard for me to answer, but I do want to comment that I don't think we need to do a lot of research, because I actually put together a table of every bylaw in the state or ordinance and what they target, but I didn't bring it with me because the committee thought it was overwhelming.
So you've already done a lot of the research.
I've read every
you
bylaw
have the
and
data.
ordinance in
Yeah,
Massachusetts.
And if I may, Trish, sorry,
has picked out
maybe a little out of order.
Hold on, let Margie finish her thought.
essential elements that might be useful to us, and I think we have the information handy, ready to do something like that.
Great, I didn't know
Yeah,
that.
and I was just going to support Margie there. I think that a lot of the research actually has been done because we've taken a couple of stabs at this, right? So Trish, maybe one approach we can take is for Margie to offline share that research, we can certainly publish it, either on the sustainability site through Sam, or so that everybody in town can see it, or on your site. That way, at least we can get past the hey, we don't know what other people are doing. What I will say is that what Margie's suggesting usually is based on that research. So,
Would you suggest that since you have all this research that the Sustainability Committee, maybe working with Peter, because I know you've been working on this before, synthesize, that's maybe not the right word, some of this information so that it gets into, okay, based on all the research we've done and the information that we have, this is what we think is most important, a priority for Ashland in terms of commercial properties. And this is what we think would work for Ashland in terms of residential properties, so that we, the planning board, just don't have a pile of data in front of us and start from scratch. We'll never get through it in a meeting, right?
So candidly, part of our reticence in doing that was we actually wanted to hear from the planning board what they felt was most important as well, because at the end of the day, this is a combined activity, right? So from our perspective, we have an extreme interest in fighting climate change and an extreme interest in achieving net zero. And the only way we know how is to protect trees, because that's about the only carbon sink we have. So those are our guiding objectives. We can certainly try and synthesize further the research Margie's done. Like she said, she already has a table and we can share that. So that's what I was offering to share up is let's start there. She's already synthesized it. If that's not meeting your need, then we can go further. But let's take what we have already and maybe share that with you. We can certainly make stronger statements from the Sustainability Committee, but I'd also want to make sure, and I heard a few voices on the planning board as well, right? I'd love for you guys to also maybe put out there what you believe are the guiding things that you want to focus on, and then maybe we can just marry that together, right? Because otherwise we can continue to have a slightly circular conversation.
Can I make 2 comments? Okay. I think that Peter has extracted some things from various bylaws that can be useful in terms of methodology. I think overall, what we've discovered is that there isn't one that works for our needs, and we need to figure out what we want to do. And it strikes me that, based on somebody's comment, that we have to decide, are these 4 things that were listed, is that our basis? Or, that's a decision that we have to make for Ashland.
Marcelo, were you going to comment?
I think the discussion on next steps is good. So the thing that I summarized what I heard last time and tonight. The first thing is I do think, and I agree with Joel, that having a point of departure survey would be good. I don't know if that's part of the analysis that the committee has done, but understanding and kind of what Anna was referring to, if we understand what the goal needs to be a little more concrete, in my view. And so we're coming to a point where through the discussions, I believe the planning board and the sustainability committee are pretty much in full agreement with the overarching goal. Now, the implementation should go through clearing all the questions. I think it would be better the next time we meet, not to come to try to answer questions during the meeting, because I don't think we're going to be successful doing that, but clearing the questions beforehand, and then come to the meeting with a concrete, either, I like the list that Margie put there, a concrete set of you can call it proposals, where you say, okay, based on the research, on the data that we collected, based on what we see the town reality is, we think we want to address A, B, and C. And the way to address it has been clear with Lisa and with Peter, and we could go on this way, on that way, or that way. And then the discussion is really, okay, which way do we really want to go? I think that would be a lot more successful, because I think we've cleared a lot of the other kind of general points.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, and just to clarify, you already did a tree survey, right? I think I read it's been a few years.
There's different kinds of surveys. We did a survey of community views.
Community views, that's what I
Yes.
meant, yeah.
But
Not counting trees.
From the very beginning, we wanted to do a survey of our trees in town, and it costs money. However, I just made myself a note because iTree is, they can do some of that for you, so I'm going to look into that.
Okay. Yeah, so I guess, and correct
Can
me, wait, hold on. Correct me if I'm wrong, Marcella,
Yep.
about summarizing what you had said. Because I think we're saying the same thing about, there's all this data, but I don't think it can be synthesized here. It has to be synthesized out there and brought to us in a more, just a suggested form. We think we should do this, and here are some points where there could be changes or compromises. Is that?
Yeah, that's what I meant, and the reason for that is that once we clear the hurdle of what do we recommend or propose doing, these options, the next step after that is, okay, now we engage the entire community and we tell them, there are these three options, we recommend this one or that one, and if possible, that one. And then you start getting feedback on that to give reality to all these thoughts, because we can keep dreaming of all we're doing, but sometimes achieving something more concrete is better than achieving nothing, right? So I think that's kind of the right kind of process.
Kate or Deepa, do you have anything to?
I mean, I agree with that methodology. I will be cheerleader and foot on the gas for the Springtown meeting, knowing that this has been worked on and kicked around for a long time. And again, I'm never a person to say, everyone worked hard, let's do this. It's the opposite, let's do this. We can be smart enough to get past those hurdles. And I think personally, maybe just the way things have worked at town meeting, but also our community, like getting real with some options. Now, I know that gets devil's in the details on bylaws, so I think the first pass might be high level. Does this affect? And then I think those issues Margie brought to us fleshed out. I just didn't get to read, like, kind of go through that ahead of time. So working to flesh out the issues that maybe have to go back to Lisa before we can even consider. And then I think also the priority of the large lands, if we think it's going to options that we have had bylaws that here's one and here's another, right, that could be progressive, but to focus on the larger things is kind of the right thing to do.
And Anna, did you have a comment out there?
Yeah, I mean, my concern is I know the sustainability folks have been looking at data for many years. And so I absolutely think there has to be a public process, but I also feel like they are coming to us prepared with data. And they're asking us, the planning board, to offer input to a direction. And so I'm not really sure what we're sending them back out to do. They've already done years of work. I for one, am very comfortable saying I believe the priority for us in this bylaw should be large chunks of land where a developer can come in to build something big. And I'm looking at properties that are the size of 501 Pond and Avenue of the Americas and some of these larger projects that the planning board has been dealing with. That to me is the priority.
I think that could.
If there's
yeah, I mean, I think it could be great. I just
think that if we, I just don't know if they need to go back out again to do that. I think we as the planning board have enough knowledge and expertise based on our experience on projects to know that that is the primary target of clearing in our community. Like, I don't think it's unknown to us. Like, we do it all the time. We're technically the ones clearing this land. So we should take responsibility. We should know by now that this is where we're at risk, and we should just do this. I don't know what else we're waiting for.
I think I'm just waiting to see a text of a bylaw, like, and that doesn't even have to be in bylaw type form, but this is our first priority. One, this is our first priority. Two, one, large commercial properties. Two, subdivisions. Three, single-family home properties. Like, those are the list of our priorities, and here's how we want to address commercial properties. Here's how we want to address subdivisions. Here's how we want to address residential properties. And so we're actually talking about something that's been collated into.
Understood, that's concrete.
Yeah, that's concrete. And that,
So-
to me, that needs to come from the people that have been working for it all these years, right? And have it in that form that now we can say, okay, Sustainability Committee, we get your priorities. We agree with them, or we agree except on these points. And now we're making kind of progress. And I mean, I think Peter, and you're working in the background with this, with the Sustainability Committee.
Yes, I am. Yeah, I've met with Margie a couple times, and I'm happy to meet with Margie and kind of continue on and take it to the next step.
So, am I missing something here? Doesn't that, I mean, okay.
I guess to say it a different way, I very much appreciate all the effort of the sustainability folks, and I'm saying that as a planning board, we're the ones who have jurisdiction to draft bylaw and zoning changes, and I think assuming there's capacity with our staff and our support, whether it's the system planner who is new to the town or our planner, I think it's time for us, for the planning board, to perhaps with town council prepare that draft for our review. I feel like we're kind of repeating the same discussions in a few meetings now, where we keep coming back to, oh, what are all these other communities doing? And I'm no longer interested, because I want to talk about our community. We are clearing land with every project, and we know exactly what we're doing, and it's time to draft it for that size.
That's why,
So whatever the average
that's why I
size-
think Peter is already working to help, maybe to help that happen. I'm not sure, unless there's volunteers and the five of us to draft a bylaw about something I don't feel like I'm the expert on, then I'm not sure how that happens. I mean, right? I mean, so.
We've had a draft for several years.
Right, so we
I think you
should
have
be-
a copy of it.
Right, so we should be, maybe at the next meeting, whatever the priority is of that draft bylaw, we have that up there, and we're talking about the draft bylaw.
I can do that.
So, I mean, once the questions have been answered, and, so let's look at the,
That's
if there's
kind of-
already a draft bylaw, let's have it up on screen and let's look at it.
Yeah, I was picking out things that are points that
Okay.
I thought we needed to delve more into.
All right, so then we're going along a path that you've been wanting to go on, is that right, Margie? I feel like we're trying to answer
Yeah, I don't know if I
your
got any
questions.
answers tonight, but as I said, I have to digest all of
Okay,
this.
Yeah, I'll just make one point,
okay,
Trish.
last comment, and then we're gonna.
Yeah. So I think our understanding was, when we met the very first time, that the entirety of the bylaw as it was written was a little complex. So I think I thought we had agreed that we'd pull out the pieces where we had the biggest questions, one of which was, for example, the subdivision thing, and present those in smaller bite-sized chunks to you guys. But to the points that have been made today, I think we certainly can try and incorporate to our best ability, right? The feedback that we've heard today, and then share with you what we think a proper version of the bylaw is, and then I'd really like the planning board to really take that thing apart and reassemble it in the manner that Anna suggested. So I think we can probably work there.
Yeah, I think it's just taking.
But can I add
No, please.
just one
Yeah.
thought? Because I think that's the next step to get clarity, kind of more concise, the objective clarified. And looking at the bylaw as the committee, the Sustainability Committee reviews it, it's great. But it would be great to still start the next discussion with a brief outline of the recommendation, of the intent. And then we'll see if the bylaw is meeting that intent. But let's make sure that we all have the intent, big picture. We are going to attack this, and this bylaw does it. And then we all can have, I think, a much, actually faster discussion to get
Yeah.
to where we want to go.
I agree. So, and we look forward to the next step. So,
Thank you.
okay, thank you. Okay, so next on our agenda is the continuation of the public hearing for 9 to 49 Homer Avenue site plan and special permit application, continued all the way back in spring on May 11th. So Peter, can you give us an update about what has happened since May 11th and where are we now with this project?
So a lot's been going on, and I just kind of overview is that number first, I want to introduce the application team here on screen. First, Terry Morris, Attorney Terry Morris, Ron Bork, and then also Rick Salvo, who just popped up on screen. So a couple notes, and just to give to your packet, there was a memorandum regarding the tech review meeting. So because we haven't, kind of gone through this process in a while, myself and Attorney Morris decided that it'd be best for the project in the town to have an additional tech review meeting. One of the items that were really kind of outstanding was access by the fire department and safety. And that really got to a point, and I'm going to let the applicant kind of speak to this, is kind of gets to the point of why we have a revised site plan, which proposes the access around the entire building. And that was really due to the fire department. Secondly, I want to make a note that the town and all planning board members and the applicant was shared all comments and emails that came back and this includes comments from the police department regarding the access, the fire department regarding the access, conservation regarding the tree plantings, DPW regarding some civil matters, and then I believe we got that was DPW. And then second, I want to make note that GCG did provide a response. It was dated September 11th. Today, I did receive a response from GCG's comments from Mr. Rick Salvo. I did print those out and put them in your packet, and that included a site plan, which I believe is printed out and put in your packet. But these all actually, the one that was printed out and put in your packet was the 20th. And I believe Rick may have updated. So he's been working really hard. The application team has been working hard to take into account Mike Carter from GCG's comments, to change the site plan to make sure it's safe from an access standpoint, and then also working with the town committees, town departments to review this project. So without further ado, I just want to hand it over to the applicant, and they can kind of run through all the changes that were made and tell us where we are at this point. The microphone is yours, Mr. Attorney Morris.
Thank you, Mr. Machek. You took a great deal of my my opening with your summary of what's happened since the last meeting, quite accurately so. I would point out one thing, and there was one of the questions that was posed at the last meeting was the question about whether there was some need for, it was actually first identified in the GCG report, and that was the existing building with a street address of 9 to 15 Homer, being situated on the same site and being of a non-conforming status as to parking and setbacks and other things. I think it's my understanding that Mr. Machak had a discussion with town council, and it was determined that we would need to provide parking for those uses. And so I set about surveying our team and the owner as well about what the requirements might be for that block if in fact it were built today. There are actually 3 existing businesses active at that site. The first is the Pizza Mine in New York Deli with a street address of 9 Homer. The second is Chris's Barbershop, which has a street address of 11 Homer. And lastly, the Sheer Perfection Hair Salon with a street address of 15 Homer. Those 3 businesses actually are subject to parking requirements based on different standards. The pizza shop requires 1 space for every 4 seats. In checking with the town, it's been determined that the town granted the pizza shop a license for 36 seats, which based on that ratio of 1 to 4 would require 9 parking spaces. The 2 properties adjacent, the hair salon and the barber shop, based on square footage, each of those units has 300 square feet of leasable space, which is the measure set forth in the zoning bylaw for parking. And based on those calculations, 2 spaces would be required for each of those units, for a total of 13 spaces being required. But because that block is located within the Ashland Downtown District, it is subject to that provision in the ordinance, which provides for a reduction in parking based upon a formula of 75% of 75%. And multiplying the 13 spaces would reduce the parking requirement to 8 spaces for those 3 storefronts today. We propose to provide that parking. Fortunately, the petitioner in this matter also owns the property at 20 Homer, the former train station across the street, which is conveniently located within 300 feet of the site and therefore qualifies for a provision in Section 5 of the ordinance that allows for parking to be located off-site from the site it serves. Then we set about determining what the parking requirements would be for the business that is located within that building. There is one tenant, and that is an accountant's office who occupies the entire building, which comprises 1,920 square feet. Again, based on the formula required of requiring 1 space for every 180 square feet of leasable space, that would translate into a requirement of 11 spaces for that use. The total parking located on the train site, as one might expect when it was used as an active station and would require parking for patrons taking the train, there are 24 spaces located on that site. Since the current business only requires 11 of those spaces, that leaves 13 spaces available for other use. We propose to satisfy and meet the requirement for the 9 to 15 block by providing parking on that location directly across the street. And as fate would have it, in fact, 2 of the businesses already rent spaces at that location. So I just wanted to clarify, that was the one point that was also dealt with in the intervening time from the last meeting. With that, I would like to, with your permission, Madam Chair, be able to share the screen with Rick Salvo, our engineer, so he might explain how we have addressed the other significant problem or challenge, I would say, for the site, and that was access to and egress from the site, given that the sight line, there was a sight line distance problem that was brought up again in the GCG report about having vehicles exit the site, from onto Homer Ave from the proposed location that we had. So we dealt with that as well. I think to set the stage for that, describing that situation, I would remind the members that there currently is a strip commercial mall located at that site, which when we get to that presentation I'll show you a photograph of that has largely unrestricted parking of cars and the exiting of cars onto Homer Avenue at that site. So we proposed a situation that we propose to deal with our anticipated reuse of the site is also basically going to eliminate a current situation that has existed there for some time. So without further ado, I will turn the microphone and screen over to Rick Salvo. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Terry, and good evening, Madam Chairman, members of the board. For the record, Rick Salvo with Engineering Alliance. You might recall the prior site plan had a full access driveway in this location, which is a very similar location as one of the existing curb cuts for the strip mall. This was all 90-degree parking. Everything came in here, parked in this field, went down the ramp into the lower level garage. And we had a combination of a walkway and a reinforced lawn to provide emergency vehicle access, since there really was no emergency vehicle turnaround there, so emergency vehicles could traverse through the site and be able to get out onto Alden Street. And that, posed a lot of questions from the fire department, what happens during the winter months to that particular area. if it's not a roadway, will it be plowed regularly? Will it be made clear? Will it keep the same width all the time? And then on top of that is the existing site distance issue. This is the approximate existing driveway location, and this curve right here creates a site distance issue for folks exiting and people coming around the corner from Main Street. This probably shows a little bit better. This is the 9 to 11 Homer Ave building. This is the existing curb cut that services the strip mall. And as you can see today, there's very limited site distance coming around that corner, which you know was concerning to folks on the staff level relative to public safety. So it became evidence that the right solution was to change the circulation so it'd be one way in, angle the parking to allow for one-way circulation, which allows us to narrow up this driveway width a little bit, create a little bit more green space along the edges, and create an actual road that will exist throughout the year, be cleared throughout the year, and provide an avenue that if a fire engine or an ambulance ever needed to pull in here, they could pull in and drive straight through the site and back out onto Alden Street. That is the configuration that you see before you. We've striped and we kept this the same width as two-way, so we could have a little area here where your Amazon truck, ride shares can pick up, drop off without impeding anybody's ability to be able to pull in, drive through the site. So the access now comes in off of Homer, accesses the surface parking lot in this area, goes down this way into the ramp into the lower level garage, and folks coming out would come out through this exit roadway and back onto Alden Street. So that kind of solved two problems. Like I said, it gave the emergency vehicle access throughout the year unimpeded by weather, and eliminated the exit lack of sight distance coming around Homer Avenue. Beyond that, stormwater is treated in very similar fashion as it was before, almost identical, where we would be infiltrating the roof, the entire roof of the building, taking all that out of the equation and capturing the parking lot flow as well in a deep sump-hooded catch basin that goes into a water quality inlet, and then would connect to this subsurface drainage field. We're also proposing there's an issue right here on the roadway where the water now currently comes down into the site, as there's a high point in this gutter line, so we'll be adjusting the catch basin over here, repaving this section of road so we can correct that problem that exists on Homer Avenue. All the utility connections will be made on Homer Avenue, and the drainage was completely recalculated to match this current condition. That was reviewed by GCG. They did make some comments. We addressed their comments, and we're awaiting their review of our revised submittal at this point. I think now I'll probably turn it over to Terry and have him just run through the architectural side, and then obviously, I'm sorry, not Ron, Terry, Ron, and then we'll be available for questions afterwards. Sorry, Ron. I think you're muted too, Ron.
Good evening, everyone. Can you see my screen okay? Should be an image.
Yes, it's on screen and we can see it.
Okay, great. So this is an updated plan and updated site plan based on Rick's work. We had some early discussions about the different types of finishes on the building, and how we could now sort of use those to identify some of the massing and establish a vocabulary. So this represents what I chose as the final rendition for the finishes, and I'll explain them in later slides and how they all tie together. But as you can see, we're looking at a variety of materials. The upper levels would have a shingle style, everything would be composite, have a shingle style look to it, very New England. And the second floors would have a 4-inch clapboard. And the lower levels, the retail levels would be identified by the storefronts and the dental moldings and the trims. So these are older slides, so I'll just pass by them, but it does show the site composite with what's existing. The shadow studies we've looked at before. And the context drawing for neighborhood context I've updated to show this latest rendition of the building and how it applies. Another view of the corner. This building data sheet we've seen. The one change that has been made is that we have several one-bedroom units, so I just identified those and updated the count. We still have the 25 residential units. In the basement, one of the comments from the peer reviewer was to indicate column locations, which I've done here. The engineering will follow. I'm confident in doing some preliminary engineering here that we can make these column locations work. They're outside of the drive areas, and there are several which are located in, as you see in many parking garages, between the spaces. So this has been indicated as they requested. Also, they requested a section through the ramp. This section is blown up to twice the scale of the plans, just so you could see the dimensions. So essentially, it's a very common speed ramp, they call it, where you have really 3 different slopes. So you don't bottom out the vehicle when you exit or enter. And these dimensions work with the standard ramp dimensions. On the first level, the first floor plan, some of the issues that we had discussed earlier was the treatment of the entries along Homer Ave, and I do have an enlarged plan that will show that a little more clearly. I did keep the pocket park. It wasn't clear to me in the comments whether the pocket park was necessary or not. I know that in our group we had an early discussion about trying to sort of speak to the train station, and I went in that direction, and I think successfully, to try to tie the two together, but respect the train station. And then in a subsequent conversation with the design review committee, they were saying we really don't need the pocket park. So I've kept it in place. It's totally one way or the other. I just didn't want to remove it if it was something that we had discussed really keeping. Layout of the second floor, again, we have the green roof on the second level, which serves as a kind of community gathering spaces for the residents. It's accessed from inside the building, as well as a stairway leading down to grade. Third level. Roof level, one of the issue we discussed was solar. And as you can see, I've indicated here by dotted lines, potential locations on the south-facing roof lines for solar. This is my initial guess. We have an engineer who helps us with solar. I'm sure he will come up with a plan that will have many more panels, particularly along this area here. But what I've shown here is, I think, a pretty good representation of where most of that solar will be. I think it came out to about 40, 45 panels. So we should be able to provide a good amount of electricity with that. The elevations, I've chose to go to the rendered elevations to give a little more context. This is a view from the corner of Alden Street and Homer Ave. And as you can see, we kind of establish zones and various datum lines, the most significant one being the cornice line from between the first and the second floor. And then we get into a change of materials on the second level and a change of materials on the third level, while we maintain a balance in the elevations themselves. We do have some brick inset panels that we'll be able to see along here, the lighter panels. So we do have a blending of materials in a very organized fashion. and they do create interest along these elevations. We've also lightened the material, so on the gables themselves, there'll be a 4-inch clapboard pattern. On the insets back, there'll be a 6-inch clapboard pattern of a slightly different tone. So it does create a little bit of depth in it. This is the view along the backside. The access road, which will now become a basically the second means of egress off the site. This would be a view that you really wouldn't see because of the adjacent building, the brick building, the pizza and hair salons. But it does give you an indication how the building bends back and changes the material. So this gets it a little more descriptive. So, you know, we'll have the asphalt shingle roofing. The 6-inch composites will be on the second levels of the insets back. The 4-inch composite clapboard style will be on the gable ends themselves, or the gable protrusions. We'll have a shingle style siding, again composite on the upper levels. Low E glazing, energy efficient construction, and the pediments with the dentils or recesses. And in the insets, we'll have a brick pattern. So we've essentially established the major and the minor, but we've maintained a horizontal to help as an organizing element.
Ron, I think it's important to point out that although your elevations show a uniform color pattern of gray and light gray, that we're still looking to establish a color scheme that would differentiate certain sections of the building, right?
That's correct. That's correct. I'll turn over the landscaping to Julian, and he can describe some of the moves he's made based on the previous discussions. So Julian, if you could pick it up, I'll take care of the screen.
Yep, thank you, Ron. Good evening, everybody. My name is Julian Salvucci. I'm the designer for this project, the landscape designer for this project. And I'm going to give you a quick overview of this planting plan. So just to preface this, when selecting plants for this plan, native plant species were kept in mind, and plants, trees, shrubs, perennials that tolerate drought once established were also kept in mind as well. So we're going to start up top by Homer Avenue and the planting plan that abuts the sidewalk and the front facade of this development. From large to small, we have dwarf river birches, Betula nigra little kings, we have Hydrangea corsifolia ruby slippers, and we have Ilex crenata sky pencils. Then for perennials, from back to front, we have Chasmanthium latifolium, Geranium maculatum, Carex albicans, and then a Nepeta little tree. So basically we have our trees up front. The Betula nigras, they get to be about 12 feet tall at maturity by 12 feet wide. They're going to be modestly sized. They're definitely suited for this space. The Ilex crenata sky pencils are just dappled along the front facade of this building, and it kind of just accentuates the architecture of the building and separates certain areas. And then for seasonal interest, we have our perennials, the northern sea oaks, the geraniums, the Carex albicans as well. What's it called? Most of the plants selected are native up front, with the exceptions of the Ilex crenata sky pencils. We have a couple of nativars, which are just cultivars of native species. An example of that would be the Hydrangea corsifolia ruby slipper. This is just a dwarf oak leaf hydrangea. Just because these straight species hydrangeas get to be about 8 to 10 feet tall at maturity, we don't want that up front. Moving around the left-hand side and into the entrance of the parking area, by the, I believe, pizza restaurants, over on the left-hand side, we have a mixture of Panica virginianum shenandoahs, which is a native switchgrass, and then a non-native Taxus media HM Eddy hedge. And I selected these just to have a seamless green wall and have year-round separation between the seating area and the entrance to the parking area, just because that's going to be heavily used, heavily trafficked. There's a lot of cars entering from that area. Continuing around to the back of the parking area, we have a couple of Pinus strobus fastigiatas. They are just a upright white pine. And then we also have a mass plantings of, I believe these are a kind of, yes, Clethra alnifolia ruby spices. The idea with these is they're just going to separate the parking area from the white fence. And the idea is that, you know, they're going to be no larger than 6 feet in diameter at maturity. And if they're let to naturalize this area, it's going to turn into a nice, fragrant thicket. They're going to be blooming in the summer. It's going to smell fabulous back there. Wrapping around further, we have another upright white pine, the Pinus strobus fastigiata, as well as a couple of Grollo sumacs. Continuing around the back, you have a set of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 upright Acer saccharum sugar maples, as well as for a ground cover in this area, we have a low-growing clover grass and wildflower seed mix. Towards the end of this driveway, of the street by where it connects to Alden Street, we have one Cercis canadensis. I have a small planting schedule on the bottom left. Everything is color coded, so it's easy to see. And I believe there is another page separate to this that shows photographs of the plants that I've mentioned. Here we go. Thank you, Ron. That is it for the ground floor planting plan. Ron, could you move it to the green roof? I can elaborate on that or talk more about, okay. Yep, like I said with the pocket park, just a bunch of Panicum Virginia A&M Shenandoahs, HM Eddies, and other plants too that mirror the planting plan that's along the front of this development by Homer Ave. Moving over to the green roof. So what you're seeing right now, you're seeing Corten steel planters. They're 18 inches tall, and they're going to have a herb, sedum, and green roof seed blend in them. These 18-inch tall Corten steel planters kind of give the framework for some pretty cool little pockets of space where people, residents, can set out some outdoor furniture, sit, relax, enjoy the open air of this green roof. So we have 1, 2, and 3 areas for residents to sit and enjoy themselves outside. One change from the last iteration of this plan was a switch from artificial turf to natural grass. And there is also in-ground LED strip lighting along the perimeters of the seating areas that will illuminate the Corten steel planters and just light the area up at night. We've decided to go with a Techoblock Borealis patio slabs. They have sort of a wood texture to them. I think they look nice up there. And yeah, that's it for the green roof. Thank you, Ron.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
So this is just a rendered version of the shadow study, which we presented earlier. Some details of the green roof and how we could deal with the areas adjacent to the what is now the roadway. These are several images of the second floor terrace. Just give you a sense of the space. And then we start to look at some aerial views of the overall development. And you can see the indication here for the solar panels. One of my goals was to show them on locations where they would not be evident to the main streets of Alden and Homer Ave. So you can see on the lower left-hand image that we're really tucked back. They'll be very, non-obtrusive, and I suspect that we'll actually be able to add a few more along here and potentially here once they do their calculations. This is an enlarged plan of the entries along Homer Ave and some of the paving patterns. And essentially, I would be looking at several different types of paving. One to help transition from the sidewalk into the space along this curved edge.
Just,
And then,
just in the interest, sorry, Ron, just in the interest of time, I want to make sure that you understand that a lot of these choices will be going through the design review committee. So I want to make sure we have time to talk about the bigger question. So if you could just kind of keep it to
absolutely.
like the bigger issues, and we can kind of see what you're doing, but we don't need to go through everything on the slides.
All right, very good. All right, very good. So then there's several images just to put you in the space itself. And that's the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. So the big issues I think we have to do, obviously the big discussion point is the change in the circulation, right? That's, obviously it's gone through the tech review, and I think that's the first thing that that's the big change here. And that's the first thing I think we should address as a board is that change and how we feel about that change. And I think Anna's still with us on the line, right? Or?
Yeah, this is Anna.
Okay.
Yes,
Just-
I'm still here.
Okay, just so we know that you're still there.
Yeah, I'm still here participating. And I guess I'll jump in that obviously there's a lot of new material, some of which just came in today. So, there's a lot of new information. It's hard to kind of react to it on the spot like that. And we're going to need, as a board to understand what are the unknowns now that we have all this new material.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is the direction, and it really sounds like it really came out of the needs of the fire department. And I think this has been kind of almost coming the entire time, that this site just did not work going in. It could work, I said it could work, but there are some downsides to going in, going out in the same position. So I feel like this is like, yep, okay, we got here. We tried everything else, and it didn't really pan out. Or the fire department, the police department, we're not comfortable with it, which obviously we take very seriously. So, so I'm not really surprised to see it worked out in this way. Just a general, this is still an all-electric building, right? Question to the applicant? It's an all-electric building?
Yes.
And is it doing ground source heat pumps, or are you looking at air source heat pumps? What are you looking at for the? I'm just wondering if it's ground source heat pumps. Are they like going in the same locations as the groundwater infiltration
Ron
systems?
showed them on the roof, didn't you, Ron?
I showed them on the roof.
Yeah, showed them on the roof.
Or the air source.
All air source?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, questions?
I do have a few, but Kate, you go first.
So I feel like there's a lot of changes, and I agree with Trish, you probably that's not a surprise on that one. Where we stand is like a lot, like I brought from the last time we saw them that you and Trish had marked up, like sending it back to design review. I actually thought it was back to design review. I didn't realize it still had to go. So that's a little
I thought the same.
disappointing, but it is what it is. But there's, the yellow is design review, the red square is something open with planning board. That's before all of this. We got something dated the 27th. There's a lot to do here. Yeah.
I mean, Peter, do you want to talk about the
Yeah,
schedule?
I can talk about that. So just to make a clarification point, I think there was a edit that needed to be made on the bylaw. The last time we heard this was actually August 10th. And Tricia and Marcelo did go over and create a design review. That did go to the applicant. The applicant received all the information. The applicant, after that meeting, was scheduled to go to design review. and design review, and I believe there was a continuance, and then design review to get all the ducks in a row to go back to design review. Design review was scheduled to meet last Thursday. It's the same Thursday as the comp plan. However, just out of the scheduling, the design review committee did not have a quorum, so they did not meet, and so they could not hear this application and to still discuss the memo that came out of that August 10th meeting. So therefore, with all the changes after the tech review meeting, I thought it was appropriate to bring it back to the planning board to make sure this still moved along at a steady pace rather than wait to go to the design review committee. So this application team is scheduled to meet with the design review committee next Thursday night at their annual meeting, and design review committee is going to receive the same information that you see obviously today. And so therefore it is going to go back to design review. It just hasn't yet. First, summertime, there was some things going on. I believe everyone was, finishing up their summer vacations. Last week, obviously, there wasn't a quorum on the design review committee. So I know there could have been a little bit of confusion with that, and I could have spelled it out a little bit better, but that's the story behind why we are seeing this again without design review having their input.
So I think that's good news. So we're back, maybe we have to remind, because that was a while, that the status of.
The memo that Tricia and I put together was
Yes.
after that.
No, this is that,
Oh,
this is that marked, it says design review committee. You put in
Yeah, that
green.
one.
Yes.
Yes.
So
That's still the memo in front of the plan.
this is where it stands, and we would be expecting from them.
Correct.
They're
Sure.
resolved, closed, just like we
Correct.
get, I think we agreed, but maybe we remind them, because there's a lot. There's also quite a few things open with planning board, though.
Actually, there's not that. I think we were able to filter quite a few items for the design review. We tried to actually do the opposite, try to clarify and make it a little more concise. So I thought that meeting had taken place, but I guess it makes sense.
No,
If
there was
they
there was
haven't
a
done it,
there was a couple
they should do it.
conflicts, and then obviously that meeting did not take place last week.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's fine.
And so with the changes, most significantly to the access, which was really driven by fire, police, access to and around the building, with the change of the circulation.
So I would propose, I counted 11 of my marks. Some of them may be small. I just literally said it's an open with the planning board. If we can look at these, they may be closed, to close this one memo, right? There's many memos, right? And open issues. So we may be able to close this or get down to less issues. Or they may have to change again, I get it, but otherwise we just have so many open things right now.
Yeah, no, I agree that, so there's the document that Marcelo and I put together that has many of those issues that are still going to wait for the design review committee, right? So a lot of things that were talked about with landscape and with the colors and with the textures and the pocket park, that's all back in their court. I don't have that copy in front of me.
But I do, so
So-
if we can't do it tonight, it's fine. I'm just trying to be helpful to try to close some issues. This had issues open to be left with the planning board.
Yeah, no, agreed, it did. And so, but that's not in our packet, so the rest of us don't have it in front of it. You brought it along because you were thinking ahead, but the rest of us don't have it. I mean,
Okay.
can you look at what?
Well, I can go, so one of them, like the setback, and we should, when this was first presented, it was saying it met all setbacks, and then we found out it actually didn't, and I think that's a big one.
Well, so that document also went to the applicant.
I've never, and I haven't received anything back from that.
Right, so obviously they were busy with this other large change, but so in that document, the things that are simply answerable, like, hey, you need to check this setback, those are things that should be responded to. So.
They
that-
were.
They were, so, but.
Oh, so this whole thing, the ones that said planning board, you were asking for another round from the applicant as well? I didn't understand that, but
Well,
okay.
not necessarily. I'm not saying, I'm saying on that question. So that question, right, show us that you've met the setback or set it back. We don't need to discuss whether it's a setback or not. The setback's given and they should
Yeah,
accommodate it,
and-
right?
And there was a good number of those that basically we're trying to discern what belongs in the design review committee and the planning board. But some of the items in the planning board were a given.
You're gonna bring it
Obviously, it has to comply
Try and-
I'm
with
trying to
setback, so
find it,
that's,
yeah.
it's assumed complete. It's part of the planning board, but we don't need to discuss it because it's by default. There's a few items like that, and we have to go through it.
Yeah, so Peter's trying to bring that document up.
Now, I do have some quick.
Other
comment,
questions,
but
please, do that
But
while we're
just,
doing.
just,
Yep.
and I know this is gonna go to design review, but just being a greedy architect, I just.
No, I have a few of those too,
comments.
but I'll let you.
So the first one, I mean, going in reverse order of what we heard, in terms of the landscape, I mean, I think it seems very appropriate. I actually like the idea of keeping the pocket park, kind of concealing a little bit of that cheek wall on the building that's gonna be left over. And I'm glad that there's a little extra planting by moving the parking in a different way on the perimeter. I think that's gonna be better for the neighbor as well. In terms of the architecture, there's a few things. The project in general, I don't have that really objections to it. There's only three things that I could that I could comment on. First, I mean, I've never been a great fan of the dentil molding on this project, and I think for the project seems very well developed. I think a little simpler banding would be better, but that's just my opinion. In terms of the color differentiation, I would like to also, we talked about this a few times ago. I would like to just urge you to not try to go too crazy with color differentiation. This project is not a very large project. I actually think what's being presented is very appropriate for downtown. I kind of like it. I don't think it needs a lot. I mean, the break is color differentiation, the different siding, clapboard thickness differentiates, so I don't think you have to go crazy and changing colors on different pieces. And lastly, the solar, I'm glad it's being thought about on the back. The problem I have with solar in general, when it's applied to roofs that are not consistently contiguous, is that it can become what you see in some houses, that it's a haphazard array of panels that look like hung on a building and not part of the building. I think solar should always be a holistic part of the project. If the roof doesn't really, this roof is not asking for it in terms of its geometry, in my opinion, and that can look very messy when it's done with every piece, panels going in different directions. I personally am not a big fan of that, but of course that, you know, it's something to consider if the proponent is going to go ahead with it. And lastly, on the site, I wanted to ask the engineer, one of the other things that is new in addition to the circulation seems to make sense to me, that extra pavement on Homer Avenue because of the height issue that the engineer highlighted, that is okay, but it's also some utility work in front of the driveway that is going to go and dig the street and install those structures. And it's not clear to me where the downtown paving stops relative to this corner. But then I'm just wondering, so we're gonna have a very nice downtown end of project at some point. Then a botched, trenched repairs for utilities, and then a new paving next. It would be great if the aesthetic of a new downtown road would not be disrupted and would be brought up to where now it's being proposed to pave again, so that the entire frontage of the site would look as part of the downtown. But that's a concern of mine.
So you're saying to get the whole entire frontage of the site from curb to curb, have a new wearing course?
Well, if I could make that decision, yes, the answer is yes. I don't know in this drawing where is the end of the terminus of the
So
of the
I
project.
can tell you the end of the project is before, so you are correct, there would be a break of, I don't know, 100 yards of old asphalt, so it would be the break point, I mean downtown project break point, old asphalt, and then it would be new asphalt down here, closer to Alden Street.
So I'm just bringing to everybody's attention that the end of the project of downtown is gonna look completely chopped off right where it's very visible.
Yeah.
And it would be very unfortunate
I
to
would
have
agree
to
with
end
you.
up on that note.
I agree with you. At the very minimum, correct, move the end of the downtown. I mean, see a new wearing course, put it along the frontage of the.
Well, that can only happen after this infrastructure has been installed.
That's
Because they're
that's
gonna have to
correct.
Trench, put sewer, put maybe a manhole, who knows, whatever is needed.
Yeah.
I don't know what the mechanism would be, but it would be painful to see that
Okay.
end up that way.
I would ask, does the applicant have a response to that comment?
I don't think we're prepared to do that right now. That's a pretty big expense to say curb to curb for the entire lake frontage, but we heard what you're saying. We'll have to evaluate it.
Okay.
Peter's got that printed and is bringing it, our document.
Okay.
So, my other comment, just as far as, like I said, I want this to go to design review committee. They haven't even seen it yet, and these are things that are in their court. But I was wondering why the backside, there's one facade of the building that has no color. It's staying white. And I'm wondering is, like, why would that be? Why would, yeah. So it seems just kind of it's kind of that typical backside of the building that doesn't get any love. So is there?
Yeah, it can certainly treat the lower level in a different,
Yeah, I think it's mostly about color. I'm not sure or maybe it's just not showing up. You said, I think that there was another color, but maybe it's really hard to see on these renderings. So on the front, you kind of get these rich grays and the brick, and I don't think the brick needs to go all around to the back, but there's, I don't know, somehow that one facade seems to, at least it's not showing up on the renderings, whatever the intention was for that facade.
yep, okay, well, point taken.
Staying on that facade, the trees that are shown along that, is that the same diameter as what's shown on the landscape plan? It looked like there were larger trees along that side, and I wondered if that overhang of those trees per the landscape drawings past your fire truck path? Yep.
Julian, can you comment on that?
Yeah, the Acer Satura and Reba, the narrow sugar maples, those get to be about 15 to 20 feet wide at maturity, but they retain that upright vestigiate form.
So does that overhang on the driveway?
Sorry, I'm trying to get to the.
Yeah, where's a good photograph of that? Because of their upright nature, potentially in the future when these trees meet maturity, they may need to be pruned by a skilled arborist to maybe limb them up slightly, but I think that would be far in the future. I think for the most part these will not get in the way of the need for a fire truck to get by there.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, unless I'm mistaken, the list that we have, that Marcelo and I put together, the things that actually involve planning board really are all planning board, almost all. Things that are planning board are reviewing with GCG, so this is an environmental impact study, traffic concern, meeting ADA bylaws, all the things that are reviewed with GCG. So we will be obviously looking at what they say about those issues. I think the only things actually remaining on those.
Can I ask a question about
Yep.
that? So has the things from here transferred that said planning board with GCG, has that been communicated to GCG?
I don't know. Has this sheet been given to GCG.
I'll double check. It was more than a month ago, but I'll make sure that it is.
Because I haven't seen like again, we got one tonight that I'm not looking at this meeting.
Yeah.
But before that, I think there was some overlap, but I'm not sure these issues. And I'm just trying to get this all organized because we have like all these floating things between
Yeah.
the emails from departments, between the ongoing GCG back and forth, that there's a lot and we should try to put it all in one place.
Yeah, it would be good to see if GCG already covered the questions that we had. Like some of them,
I
they
think
surely.
the real, almost in its entirety.
I'm sorry?
For the nature of these comments, I think they will be covered by the review.
Yeah, and if there's
by-
not
by
something
default.
specific, obviously,
But
we should
be
note.
confirmed.
Yeah, we should note that.
I'll
Um,
confirm, but yes.
I think the things that are not related to GCG are on page, at the bottom, page 17 of 19. One of those is that the Design Review Committee was wondering about the easternmost commercial space having an entrance door off of Homer. So, it says commercial space updated and stair relocated due to parking radii below. I don't know if that's still the case. Is it perhaps the stairway that's right on the street edge of Homer? Oh, sorry, no, the street edge of
Alden?
Alden.
I
They're
believe
talking about-
I believe the comment was that the way that these spaces have been identified, which are totally, we don't know who's going to be the tenant and how this will be eventually allocated, was that to have a door off of Alden and a door off of Homer in the same unit. So for example, if this wall moved to here, then this wall would have to disappear so that this space would have access. I believe that's what that comment was about. But as I said, we have no idea who the tenant's going to be at this point.
Right, because it looks like you have a door.
We have a
So
door
maybe,
off of-
so maybe that was already accommodated? It looks like there is a door to Homer, unless, depending on how the,
Is that door intended to be a retail entry point or just a convenience entry to the space?
So these would all be retail entry points.
Ron, show that Alden elevation.
oh, I see. So they were just asking on that commercial space right there, they
Yeah.
have one door that's going out onto Alden instead of Homer. And their question was, should that commercial space have a door on Homer?
Right, and I believe our discussion went to, as I just mentioned, that I've indicated how this space could be separated, but that's the way it's gonna be separated, depends on who the tenants are. So for example, if this wall were to come over here, then this tenant would have an access from both locations. That would require that this wall would not exist, and then this would be the space for this tenant. So it's all in how the spaces are allocated, depending on who the tenants are.
Deepa, any view on that from commercial interior point of view?
No, I think what he's getting at makes sense. It depends on that division, definitely, because the square footage increases, you may need to exit. And it feels like he's on the right track for now.
So really, it's the applicant's risk about where they put the doors and if that'll be suitable for tenants, if the
Yeah.
tenants will like it. So,
I'm gonna write close and make you happy on that one.
what's that?
I'm gonna write close. Well, I just, like, we should
Okay.
be consistent with the
Yes.
process that we like.
Yes, I appreciate your attention to that. Okay, so I think I guess Anna may be there, maybe she doesn't have an opinion on the door.
Yeah, no, I'm, yeah. Can you guys hear me?
Yes,
So I had a couple of questions. I'll just kind of list them all so it's easier for the applicant to answer. One question was just to kind of get an understanding of there was a mention of the green roof for residents would have kind of a light on the roof. You know, I have friends who live in Boston in beautiful buildings that have rooftop lights, and it's a very striking thing in a more urban setting. So I just want to make sure I understand how that fits within Ashland, which is a little bit quieter, and at night, you know, you can sometimes still see stars and light pollution, I think, is a concern, at least for me as an Ashland resident, because Ashland is certainly far less urban than some of our neighboring communities like Crania. So when you're kind of imagining the social green roof, which sounds lovely, perhaps more in an urban setting, can you just describe a little bit of what you're, what you're seeing as far as like, is this an all-night access point for your residents? Is it, very well lit? So, late at night you're kind of in that more vibrant environment, or is this still kind of a quieter? What does this look like? Like, I'm having trouble understanding what this building how it will change the energy of the downtown. That's question one. And then question two is a little bit more about the parking situation, with the retail space downstairs, if you will, how you did the analysis of parking spaces and how you're envisioning, where would the commercial visitors park and what would that look like relative to the traffic, if you will, of this building. And I guess we'll just start with those two things. Thank you.
Sure. So I'll start with the first question about the green roof lighting. So Julian, if you could jump in and just explain what your concept was on this pathway lighting. It's a very subdued lighting that really accentuates the edges rather than
correct, Ron. Yeah, that's really all it is. It's a very subtle lighting that's going to be going along the perimeter of these seating areas on the green roof. It's not going to be overbearing at all. It's going to be very dull in the background, sort of. It's just to keep people from bumping into the Corten steel planters after dark.
Right. So the majority of the lighting that will be in those areas will be generated from the units themselves, I would think. And the second question about the commercial parking, we're looking more towards this surface parking being for the commercial units and the subsurface parking being for the residential. And potentially, like a unit worker or occupant able to park down there as well if necessary. But the majority of that parking along this perimeter would be for the commercial spaces.
I appreciate the answers to both. I think that the first point makes a lot of sense, and that addresses my concerns. And on the second point, it kind of interrelates this idea that I think Marcelo brought up of, could there be an extension, if you will, of the streetscape? There's obviously, we want you to be successful, we want the building to do well, and we want commercial use of it. And it's a win-win for everyone, right? That could also mean an impact to Ashland Street with parking, et cetera. It's kind of like a common responsibility, if you will, where there might be a win-win for you to really fix up that area. That was my question and comment. Thank you.
Right. So, Anna, we had been talking about the commercial space and the door on the easternmost part of that commercial space. I think the four people here have a consensus that the doors are good as they are. Did you want to weigh on that, or?
I'm good with that. The only thing I'm nervous to kind of have consensus or comfort on is it is quite a change in design, not the doors, but the movement all around the building and all that. So as long as we're not conceding in the room that, we're kind of done talking about that, I think we do need design review and we do need further discussion, especially if the data coming in today.
That we're not done. I didn't. Can you?
Design review still gets first.
Oh yeah.
Oh, the doors are fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This was just one item that came back from our review. It came back to the planning board that we were going to make that call on if a door was needed, and it sounds like we're good. We're good with the way it is, so that is closed, as Kate would say. And the other item that has planning board that does not have GCG is that the note that 3 units have access only from the green roof. This is an and the applicant can say if that's true or not. And they were concerned that this might be an egress issue and might need to be reviewed with the building commissioner, which may not have been done yet.
The building commissioner was present at the meeting, wasn't he, Peter? Last week?
He was, Terry, yes.
So, and I didn't hear any comment from him on that. I don't think there was any concern there.
Well, given that you were mostly talking about the egress for the fire department, it might not have come up, but, so that would just be that's a question.
We can ask them, we can take this to the building commissioner.
We'll ask Doug Scott if he has if there's any issues we need to be aware of with that. Obviously, the building has to meet building code, and that's first and foremost. So if it meets building code, then he's the building code commissioner. So we will see what he says.
Can I get clarity?
Anna, you want to add a comment on that?
Sorry, do we have, it sounds like there was many important people in that discussion. Do we have a memo from that building?
There is. It's in our notebooks. I don't know if it went
it's in our
out.
notebooks and it went out to everybody. I believe I sent it to you, Anna, prior to the meeting. I can send it to you now.
Thank you.
Oh,
Thank you.
I guess
I
along that
appreciate it.
lines, did that get published to the public part of this too? Can it? I know we got
Can be
that
put-
a day or
I'm
two
happy to be
ago, so-
posted on it. We finished it
Yep.
and we can put that up.
Yeah, it has a September 26th date on it, so it's just this week, but it can be put online. Yep. So those are the
Thank you.
issues, those are the issues that I saw that were besides the issues that need GCG input that were directed back to the planning board. All other issues were either resolved
The
or.
setback one?
The setback needs to be resolved.
Eight,
Yeah, that was the first one.
yes.
So,
But the setback is not for us to resolve anything. We're making a point that obviously has to.
it just
comply
has
with
to meet the
setbacks.
setback. Yeah, so,
Well, it has been resolved. It was this corner right here. So the building was pulled back slightly
okay,
to accommodate this.
it was just a little too close. Okay,
8, 9 inches, I think it was,
okay.
or a foot.
Tricia, one more question.
Yep.
If I could. Or have we talked about affordability? It's been a while since we last had a meeting, so I just don't remember. What are we looking at as far as affordability count for the
I
unit?
think affordability was offered at 10%. And so, yeah, we talked about this a little bit. Peter and I did in terms of actually looking at, well, when we give our report, then the MBTA, talking about affordability. And so Peter did do a little study on that. Yeah, I know, I guess, what's the question on it? They're offering 10%, you're asking what else can you do?
Yeah, I'm asking, is the applicant willing to offer more than, obviously, the 25 is ideal. Is the applicant willing to go for that?
25%. If I might respond to that, Madam Chair.
Please.
I have practiced in a number of jurisdictions in more urban settings where this issue is obviously at the forefront of things. But every one of those communities operates with an ordinance or bylaw that requires a certain percentage. The percentages vary depending on the communities. The idea, but Ashland does not have such an ordinance. We offered the 3 units, even though we didn't have to do so. To 25, I'm sorry, I had to take a deep breath when 25% was offered, because no community do I know that has gone over 20, and I don't think there's anybody that's too many that have approached 20. Newton, where I live, has a tiered structure depending on how many units you're providing between either 15 or 17 and a half, but that has a level of affordability attached to it. Meaning you can rent or sell certain units at 110% of AMI versus 65% of AMI, depending upon how many number you're doing. We are, the owner and I and and Mr. Salvo are involved in a project in Framingham, where Framingham has a 13% requirement. And they have, in order to encourage people to give more, they are exploring the idea of us taking community preservation funds and setting up a fund to subsidize more affordable units within these projects. So
So that's
Ashland
exactly
is
the kind of answer. Yep.
So
I'm
Ashland,
sorry, go ahead,
I'm
please.
sorry, Ashland isn't set up to do that. And so to ask us to go to, to increase it, there's a lot of things, you're right, that we put on the table. We're now talking about perhaps repaving the whole frontage along Homer Avenue from curb to curb. All of these things have to be evaluated, I guess, so I'm not going to say yea or nay.
Absolutely. Oh, no, and please don't misunderstand my question. I
Okay.
say, hey, we must have it. I simply asked if you were willing, and your answer is actually very educational, at least for me, as a planning board member. Affordability is something that we've been discussing here at the planning board, but also with the select board, and the importance of exploring the possibility of this kind of affordability. And so your thoughts are actually extremely helpful for me as a planning board member, because it educates me as to what you have thought about, what kinds of community standards, requirements have been helpful to you as a developer. And although Ashland may not be prepared for that kind of discussion today on this project, you just educated me quite a bit and offered some helpful contrast, if you will, as to where we are versus other communities. Because this question of how to discuss affordability is something you can imagine is coming up a lot. And this specific board has started to think about using CPC funding for affordability, which we could do here, just like Framingham.
Yeah, so
that I don't think is off the table, and we as a planning board might want to discuss.
yeah, so I think that's, we need to address that at another meeting where the planning board specifically talks about, I mean, it's not just our call, right, but about how use of those funds can be used, or how we could work with CPC to, to make those choices about how those funds might be used. So, but I do think it's to throw out these kind of things about, could affordability be raised? Could we get that sidewalk, right? And then now you're making choices. Okay, you can do one or the other. Which one is it, right? And there's a fist fight amongst the planning board to decide which you get. So to throw these things into the mix. I think for now, I'm looking for just a general consensus, I guess, that the approach that we're doing, the main change to this plan is the change in the roadway. And yes, there's lots of little things that probably had to shift a little bit to make that happen, but that is the primary result coming out of the technical review. To me, that seems like a no-brainer for safety and traffic, and the fact that we lose maybe a little pocket park on that side is really fine. I think I'm fine with the greenery. I'm not sure who would be sitting there anyway. So I think it's a good move in favor of safety, and I'm wanting to know, are we in general consensus with that is good, they can move on?
I agree completely.
Okay.
My question is, this GCG reports has a lot of comments on parking and parking spaces, parking dimensions. I know, Ron, you shared that slide, but we didn't get into the details of all that. You mentioned that you added columns per the GCG recommendation, but did that affect parking spot sizes? Were the counts affected in any way? It looks like with the retail space, there's some discrepancy in the dimensions and counts. Is that all getting resolved? Is that something we should revisit to make sure?
Yes, so the GCG letter went out September 12th.
Yeah.
Right, and the response right? Was something we received today?
Correct. The response was received today, and just to make note, GCG Mike Carter, he was actually present at that tech review meeting, and so he's been able to meet in person with the application team. So I think, yes, there was a lot about parking and X, Y, and Z, but I think since then, obviously, this new plan has been submitted, taken into account, and this has been sent back to GCG. So in some instances, yes, this is appropriate to look at GCG's letter, but I think in time, I think this was done, GCG's letter was completed on a previous plan. So I think it makes sense just to hold back, let GCG take a look at the new plan. They were present at the meeting. They were on board with the change to the circulation, and wait and see the next response letter from GCG.
So there is a one more review. This is
Correct.
not
There's
the
an
final.
ongoing review
Okay.
going on right now that would make this past tense.
Okay, it also talks about missing landscape plans, which talks about storage, snow storage, and all
And-
that fun stuff, so.
And on the new plan, everything has been updated, and to, number one, the new plan is updated in response to this letter. Number two, it's updated, the plans are updated with this new circulation, which was, driven by the fire department.
Thank you.
So I do have a question. So there were zero concerns about traffic with this new, not talking on this, I'm talking traffic, sight lines, all that. I didn't get any sense of that. And I can wait for the report, but I'm just curious, like, did this magically fix everything?
Well, I think number one, there was two issues with the old plan. I can speak to this, and the application can speak to this too. Number one, the fire department never had an access way out, right? In talking to the fire department and, Keith Roby and Deputy Chief Lynn Morham, there was no easy way to back out onto Homer Ave, right? And so there was always going to be this pathway out to Alden, right? Now, in the previous plan, they were going to use these honeycomb cinder blocks. They're actually put into the ground, and they're filled with topsoil, and then there's grass seed on top of it. And so they could use that in the event. However, there was still this ongoing issue regarding sight lines for all vehicles exiting out onto Homer. And so opening up this back for a more permanent exit out onto Alden relieved two stresses. Number one, it relieves the stress of the fire department, and number two, it relieves the stress from a safety standpoint of vehicles coming out and taking a left and or a right with very limited sight lines.
So the sight lines are better in the new
Correct.
plans, and everyone is happier.
Correct.
With the sight lines exiting the site.
Correct. In instance, you can go out onto Alden Street, take a left, use that stoplight, and then take another left and go back up Homer towards the center of town. And so you can use that stoplight to your advantage at the gas station. The one item that was noted that they would like to see no parking along along Alden Street between in front of that store, from the curb to the entrance. And that was that was another request you'll see, from, I believe, the police department. But I think other than that, everybody was in strong agreement that this was a much better plan and a much safer plan.
Yeah, so I agree with that, so I'm thinking like specifically, now do we do a different traffic study? It's a completely different pattern. And then I do have, my concern is, people complain about not enough parking. Now we have to strongly consider taking away yet more parking downtown on that Alden. So that's an issue, but
I don't know if that's really an issue, Kate, because the distance from the corner to the inside.
you might not be able to park anyway. Yeah.
You should not park that close to the corner anyways, and the fire apparatus needs to have sightlines. So I think that's a perfectly legitimate justification for it.
And I think there could be
They
walk
actually
over.
requested it.
They requested
Oh,
it.
I saw the.
Yeah,
the
no,
chief
I
requested
understand.
it.
I'm just saying as part of the project and our approval, now we're potentially taking, but I agree that corner may have not really been parking. But, so we're introducing more traffic to a neighborhood that's a small neighborhood. And I absolutely think that has to be considered and understand, and we should have a full understanding of that.
Yeah, so that's something.
That's not the way this was on August something when we saw this.
Right, so that should be something that we should note to GCG, and I think we do,
And
actually.
I think as a summary, GCG report actually says the lack of parking spaces should be further analyzed by a traffic impact study. So that's one of their recommendations as summary for this whole. The 12th one. This is still the 12th report, but that's a summary that they have that feels like you do need probably an updated traffic impact. But this was, again, if they have newer plans, I don't know if this will change again.
To the application team, did you hear the conversation here? Oh, Terry, you please.
I'd like to respond to the Catherine's observation about the traffic on Alden Street.
Of course, yes.
If, under the previous plan, where people were basically coming in and exiting out Homer Ave, if they were proceeding from the west and the north, they would simply go out and then go and head back where they came from. People now will basically enter, coming from the west and the north will come in, they will go around the site, and when they approach Alden Street, they're not going to take a right to go down Alden Street into the neighborhood. They're going to take a quick left, and you can see there to short left onto Alden and return heading west on Homer Avenue from whence they came. So I don't think that changing the entry point of this driveway and making it one way in is going to significantly impact how much traffic is put onto Alden Street. That's just an observation. The other thing I would say, I don't know, Madam Chair, where we are in the process, but I do, I would like to make some summary remarks on behalf of the team, if I might, at some point, whenever you would choose to have me do so.
What kind of summary remarks? What?
Summary remarks would, first of all, thank the effort that you and Marcello made to review the Designing Review Committee 2 reports and try to scale them down and indicate what was resolved and what was, still outstanding.
Oh, well, I appreciate that. It's actually part of a process that we are internally trying to resolve on, in general, and your project just was the one in front of us at the time. So,
and that does speak to my second question, really, rather than an observation, and that is that, as I understand it, the relationship between the Design Review Committee and the Planning Board is the Design Review Committee really functions as an advisory subcommittee to the board.
That's right.
That ultimately, what's done is your decision.
That's right, but the Planning Board does not have time to discuss the many little implications, or nor do we want to, that, so those things fall to the Design Review Committee, and we expect them to be resolved, at least mostly, in that context.
Understandably. The important word you said was resolved. Resolution is something that is important in the GCG report. Every one of those listed items says resolved, or still open. But at the Design Review Committee, we may run up against decisions about certain elements of the project that are entirely subjective. And we maybe say, look, we understand what you're saying, but this is the way we want to do it. I mean, there's a certain element of creative license here that's involved in each and every one of these petitions. It's never expected that petitions will come and go through the process. They will be certainly accommodating to incorporate changes, as we have done on certainly the biggest one on the entry road. But they may be aesthetic change, especially when you're designing a design review and it's talking about landscaping and forgive me, Marcello, but dental molding on the building. I would agree with you about the potential messy look of the solar panels, but the dental molding is entirely subjective. Now, we therefore
actually I agree with you, and I put it on that light. That was just a personal opinion, but not a demand for change. That you
Thank
guys are
you.
the
And so finally, I would say that we may come back to you after going design review, and we may not be totally resolved as you have characterized it. We may have said, look, they believe this, we're able to accommodate that, but this is what we're presenting to you, to the board, to make a decision on.
Yes, I think that, and the board can disagree with me, I think we've discussed this before as a board, that we are looking for the Design Review Committee to give us their informed opinion about, as professionals, about the topics that the bylaws say that that their committee is supposed to be looking at. But the final decision does rest with the board. And so if the applicant disagrees with the design review committee, the design review committee wants the building to be purple and you guys want it to be gray, yes, that decision will come before the planning board, and we will make the final call.
Right. Thank you very much for that clarification. Appreciate it.
All right, on that note, I think we need to wrap this up for tonight. We just got the GCG report that'll be going through again. There's things that, obviously, the bringing together all of these documents, as Kate was talking about, needs to happen. And now that the tech review, which I think was very important, came to some resolution.
Correct.
That we can hopefully go forward with those other issues, the smaller issues.
But the tech review, there were a lot of documents, has a few, and they are smaller, but there are still some open issues. And that's what I'm trying to say, can we get them all in
Yes,
place?
I am not saying that anything is resolved. I'm saying that the big move, we agree with the tech review that this seems safer. But we will let GCG and others advise us further. Right, okay.
So our next meeting is on October 12th, and I think it makes sense to move it to October 12th. At that point, hopefully, the Design Review Committee will have met with the application team. And going back on the DCR, they've been actually sending us reports rather quickly, right after the meeting. So hopefully, we can get something back and out to the planning board by, I would say, next Friday and or the latest next Monday, which will be therefore shared with the application team.
And our deadline on this project has
So
been,
we have a deadline of October 15th, and that was done, that was completed through the applicant. And so obviously, I think they want to get through tonight, and then leading up to the next meeting, the Attorney Morris and I will work out an extension that would suit both the applicant and the town.
all right, so we will be hearing about that before the next meeting?
Yes.
Okay, so that we don't go into that thinking that we have to make a,
Correct. And to the applicant, to Attorney Morris, do you concur that we'll have an extension leading up until the the meeting on the 12th from a verbal standpoint?
Well, we already have, I believe our extension now goes to the 15th.
To the 15th, exactly. But, to understanding, so that's for us to make a decision on the site plan. And obviously, there's still some outstanding issues, and you're going to design review next week. I don't know, the planning board does like to see, a decision being developed, and there's a couple outstanding items. I think at this point, we're looking to extend it, out at a minimum to October 26th at this point.
You and I have always worked cooperatively to achieve the extensions for a reasonable period. I think we'll continue to do so.
That's what I was looking for, Attorney Morris.
okay.
I make a motion
I was
that
just
we
gonna say I did
continue
not.
the 9 to 49 Homer site plan special permit application till the October 12th meeting.
I'll second that.
And before we vote on that, I just wanted to say that I think in relation to that, because I don't think the planning board would be comfortable heading into a meeting on October 12th, knowing that the deadline is October 15th.
You won't have to deal with that. We'll have an
Okay.
extension before
All
then.
right. Thank you.
I'm sorry I didn't make that
Roll call vote?
Deepa Venkata.
And
Point of-
Kosminski, aye.
Point of order, Madam Chair.
Yes? Oh,
No,
let's finish the vote.
Catherine Jersey, aye.
Oh, sorry. Tricia Kendall, aye. I didn't hear you, Marcella. So that is continued till October 12th. Joel, you had a point of order, very quickly?
Well, very quickly, this is a public hearing. I had my hand raised. I wasn't recognized. Do I have a right to be heard on this?
We don't have to offer public comment at every meeting. And so as we're getting close to 10 o'clock, I opted not to take public comment, but we'll make a note to take it on October 12th. And so ask you to return at that time, and/or please send an email to the planning board.
Thank you.
On that note, it is 10 o'clock. We have one more item on our agenda, and I'm hoping,
Well, I have to text you.
I already did.
Okay, you
I
texted her.
texted her, but maybe you can do it as well. I'm hoping Yolanda will pop on briefly to just give us a couple sentences on this. Planning board representative, meanwhile, we'll go on to other things, but yeah, let's just wait and see if she pops on.
Oh, she's here. I got her. So
Never
this
mind.
is her phone number down here.
Okay.
I can recognize it. Yep, her hand's raised.
Yolanda? Can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you, and now I'm unmuted. Sorry, I'm driving home from an event. So
Thank you for joining us late, but at least we caught you in your car. So Yolanda, can you please explain what this is and what you're asking for?
Sure. So for many of you, you may know we're part of the Metro West Regional Collaborative, and that is one of the subregions of MAPC, or the Metropolitan Area Planning Council. And each town or city that's part of the Metro West Regional Collaborative is supposed to have two appointees, one that represents the select board and one that represents the planning board. Since Preston Crow has no longer been on the planning board, there's been no planning board representative. And how that's an issue for the collaborative is we need a quorum of people to be able to vote on funding, on our work plan, and on bylaw changes. So I'm requesting today, I know it's hard for some people to come to the meetings. They're typically the third Thursday of the month from 8 to 9:30 a.m. Currently, they're mostly via Zoom. But what I'm requesting is that Alvaro, your assistant planner, be appointed as the planning board representative. So as he's been attending the meetings since he's joined us, and that way Ashland would have two people representing it, and it would allow us as a collaborative to have discussion and to have vote. The other plug I would give is if you as a planning board member are interested, it's a great organization to be a part of. I have learned so much as a select board member being part of it, and it's not that big of a lift for anybody, but I understand that for some people trying to make meetings at that time is difficult. And that's my ask tonight.
Great. Thanks,
So I wanted to
Yolanda.
answer questions.
Yeah, and just hold on if you can as you drive home.
Yep.
So the first ask would be planning board members. Does anyone have availability, a planning board member, to fill that slot? It's the third Thursday of the month from 8 to 9:30 a.m. Is that something, a slot that do we have a member of the planning board that could fill that slot?
I cannot, but before we take a vote about Alvaro, I think we should try to talk, if no one else has availability. I imagine most of us have interest. I would love to go. Is Amanda as our associate member? I think we should at least check in with her. Unfortunately, she's not at this meeting.
I mean, here's part of the issue. I know Alvaro can go. Anybody can attend the meeting. Certainly, we can make sure that people are on the distribution list. And I had talked about this with Tricia the other day. She's like, well, what if I'm interested? I'm like, well, the idea is that you have one person who you know is your representative, and then other people can attend. We have events. We have an event coming up next month. That's a great trails event. So anybody can attend those events. And we need to know sooner rather than later, because, as I said, we've had issues trying to do some of our work because there's been no planning board representative.
But you will not have another meeting before October 12th, is that right?
We are not having another meeting until October 26th. So, I mean,
Okay.
I guess we do have some time, and our next voting meeting would be in November.
Okay. So why don't we, because I think that's a fair point, and Amanda couldn't be here today. I don't know what her work schedule is. Yes, so why don't we put this discussion earlier on our October 12th? We can talk to even Amanda in advance about it. to see if someone can, if that's a slot that can typically be filled by someone. And if not, I think Alvaro would be a great candidate to help us have a voice on that committee when no one else can possibly attend. So,
Yeah, I just want to make a note.
I guess my other comment would be this, is that there are many communities that it is either their planner or an assistant planner or someone like that who is representing them.
yeah, I think that's a fair point. So I think that Kate has also made a good suggestion, so that maybe we can't quite make a decision here tonight, a final decision, but I think we have good options. It sounds like Alvaro, he goes to the meetings, he's interested and available to fill that role if no one else can, or if no one else can commit to it, that he can be that regular member. So,
yeah.
So we will put that on our agenda for October 12th, and yeah, and maybe at that time, we'll have you come back, like I said, at a better hour.
That would be great.
Okay.
I mean, this worked out, but.
Okay. Great. Thanks, Yolanda. I appreciate you being available.
Not a problem.
We will get that spot officially
Were there
filled.
other questions, or before I drop off, is there any other questions?
I would love to get added to that kind of so that we
This is Anna. Can you guys hear me at all?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yep.
Okay. I just had a quick question. Is there any chance for that meeting to not be during work hours? Because I think all of our planning board volunteers have full-time jobs during business hours. Is there any possibility for that time to be changed?
That time has been set for quite some time, and most of the people who attend, that is the best time for them to be there. Because it's a mix of staff and volunteers.
Deepa, did you have a question?
I'll be curious to know how folks who want to listen in can be added to that meeting, just so that we listen in. And I would love to understand what happens in those meetings. What does that hour and a half really seem like?
I'm happy to introduce you and get you on the email list.
Yeah, that'd be good to attend.
Yeah, I'll take care of it. Actually,
Okay.
I can have
Thank you,
all
Peter.
planning. Yes, Yolanda.
No, I just said thank you. Yeah, I mean, anyone can come in and sit and listen. And if people want a little more detail of what we do at a meeting, quickly today, I can tell you today that we discussed change of bylaws. We discussed some projects because of some extra funding. We also heard from, legislative updates that are happening and projects and things that are, we're looking at having a discussion about the MBTA Community Act so that all the communities involved can sort of understand and see if we can support each other in different ways. But if anybody has a question, reach out to me, and I'm willing to have a conversation with you before your October 12th meeting. It won't be this coming Saturday and Sunday the 8th, but I'm on vacation. But the 9th or 10th or 11th, I'm willing to talk to people and give them more information about what the organization does. Just shoot me an email.
All right. Sounds good. Thanks, Yolanda.
Okay. You're very welcome. Have a good night, you guys.
Drive safe.
Thanks. Bye.
Okay, so next on our agenda are the various reports on planning topics, reports from board members and town planner, et cetera, et cetera. We can take those in any order.
Can I do comprehensive plan? Because I do have some. So I think it's a little bit general feedback for the board, and some Peter, I'm hoping, will take to the consultant. And one was just almost to the person of the public, like I've spoken to that were there, and they were very impressed, including people who said, I never thought I could say I'm impressed by a consultant. So and maybe you'll get that to her. Volume was a problem, both in the room and on Zoom. And then a request to have more involvement for the remote participants. And I know, I think she loosely knew that, but just to see what they can do. So I'd appreciate if you can get that to her. The feedback out of it for Ashland, for us, is the sound. I have both Zoom people and the room. The PowerPoint should be distributed and posted. I don't think I haven't gotten it yet. There's PowerPoint, so to the committee, but also posted. I think we should. And then this is pretty frustrating because like I don't check my phone a lot, but like right before the meeting, there were two, and I realized it's really three. One person drove there because she couldn't get the link. So I would like to see us get a consistent spot for the link to the meeting, because we were encouraging people to participate either remote or Zoom, or especially Zoom. And like this, there's a lot of spectacular involvement. Like one of the people that was having trouble Zoom, reasonably sophisticated, found it, but had to go several places and actually had a watch party with their neighborhood. So pretty cool. But those are things I think we have to do better. Like the actual got feedback both in the room and the Zoom. The person that's having the watch party, it really was a watch party. So meet your neighbors, bring a bottle of wine, but get them involved. So the actual whole volume on that group. But again, I received that feedback from a lot of people. So, and then I can just add that I think when you hear a lot of people being very impressed, I think Ashland did a great job of getting the right consultants.
So the technical issues are taken care of by, obviously not the planning board.
And obviously not the planner. Nah.
I wouldn't trust either.
No, I'm just kidding. You know, obviously we do, it is in the basement of the library, right? And so it's a big group of 29 people, and I think it's a challenge, right, from a technology standpoint, that we do have an owl. It's linked in the middle of the room, and the owl, you know, we've used the owl on the planning board, and it's good, you know, but I think, yeah, it is probably challenging for a group of 29 people. And I agree with you, the whole breakout rooms, how does that happen, you know, in coordinating that kind of online activities, right? And so there are challenges right? And I think that's just one of those things you have to iron out, you know, and I don't think, it's one of those things you can't predict, right? And so.
So do we have someone that, like, who works on that?
So we talked about sound.
Solutions.
Yeah, well, I think as a group, and Kate, I think you can attest to this. I think on the sound part of it, you know, I think we talked about trying to get a microphone in the room with an amp, not an amplifier, amp, you know, a mic, you know, I guess a speaker, right? So at least, you know, especially, you know, Jen's voice, our consultant's voice, is a little bit more clear over the microphone. And in that instance, in the hope that the owl picks that up a little bit, you know, towards the middle of the meeting, you know, we knew sound was an issue, is that our consultant was moving closer and closer to the owl, which is really the microphone, right? And so in the stream of the meeting, that was done, and obviously that was noticed. But what do we start change? Do we change rooms? You know, I don't know what that, I don't have that answer, you know, myself.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, is this an issue for them? I guess it's now defunct management committee. I don't know, or, you know, I don't know whose ballpark this is to help you with the technical issues, or are we just making a general comment?
I think I'm reporting, but I think it's really important. I mean,
Okay.
if we want the public involved, and we need to involve the public in a public plan, we have to address these things one way or another.
Yeah, I'm just not sure.
But some of them are,
board is
well, it's under reports, but Peter, I assume, is in contact with the consultant, and I think if there's some things that she can improve and also make sure that
I think we can improve. I think number one, the microphone.
All right, but let's not go into the technical issues here in the planning board. We will leave you to resolve those.
Good to know that she's good enough that people are actually getting together,
Yes.
trying to listen to her.
Yes. Okay, so who's?
Tricia, if I could add a point
Very
of
quick.
clarification, and yeah, and I mean, I'm listening to you guys remotely, so perhaps I misheard, but I think I heard someone, maybe it was Tricia, referring to the project management team as defunct, I think.
Oh, I didn't know if that team then got absorbed into the bigger group?
No.
Okay.
I think there's still, and there has not been any formal vote by the project management team to dissolve itself, nor has there been any formal vote by the steering committee to dissolve the project management group. And the issue of structure of why does the project management team exist relative to the steering committee goes back multiple years when the select board and the planning board reviewed Michael's proposal for the creation of the steering committee. And it was that document, I believe in June of 2022, that created the project management team, which according to Michael's document would continue.
Yeah, I wasn't looking to go into an issue about who's who. I was just wondering, I just wondering who was responsible for solving the technical issues. That's all. I didn't mean any. Okay, so
No. I heard the word defunct and I wanted to clarify, but what I will say is that the really amazing is we have consultants that is really impressing so many people and attracting people into the room. And that's really exciting. And all the effort of individuals like all of us who have worked so hard to get people into the room. And Tricia, I know you attended, which was awesome. Tricia and I were in the same group in the breakout sessions. And that was really fun for me to kind of get to know Tricia in a different way other than the meeting. So I want to encourage other planning board members to come to the next steering committee meeting, because anytime the public shows up, there will be opportunities to participate. But the other thing I'll say is, like, it's a mystery right now to many of us, at least to me, like, who is going to take care of all of these sort of mysterious technical things. That's why the project management team still needs to exist. And that structural issue right now is the unknown. So I'm glad you raised it, Tricia, by mentioning it, because I did want at some point to highlight for the planning board that it's going to need to be flushed out a little bit. What is the role of the project management team, and what does that mean?
Oh, great. I mean, I'm just curious as to who will resolve such issues for you, knowing that it's not this body. So. But anyway, are there any other reports? I think the only thing I would like to mention is that just today, Peter and I and Joe Mignani, who is the select board representative, and Alvaro met as the working group for the MBTA communities. It was supposed to be 30 minutes. It was an hour and a half that we started just to get into this, into the details and what we needed to, strategy. So it was a good meeting, and we'll be meeting again, obviously, multiple times before we come back to the board. There's nothing to report at this time, but just letting you know that we're meeting.
And, Peter, I assume the report on the lawsuit is just is ongoing.
So we're gonna schedule. There's a meeting next Monday. There's something going on next Monday, and then I've been advised by a council that after the court date, we will be setting up a joint meeting with the select board to enter into executive session to talk about it, and that's what I've been advised to state to you as board members. But we do have counsel. We have been appointed counsel from our insurance company, and so both are talking to each other and working together to iron out this issue.
Thank you.
The only other, can I just give a quick update? The one update I do want to make note of is that we have received a new application, and it is for 400 Cedar Street, and that's a water tank cell tower, and that will be on our agenda next at the next meeting, the 12th. 400 Cedar Street is on, I would say, Upper Cedar Street. It's on the Holliston line. Butters of Holliston and Ashland have all been notified within the 300-foot radius because it sits on that town line. This is a town-owned tank. Their equipment actually sits on top of the tank, and so the town of Ashland let their lease expire because we were afraid of the structural damage of having equipment sit on top of the tank. And so with an open spot on the side of the tank, the town of Ashland sent out an RFP, and so the application will be to put new equipment on the side of the tank. and that can be explained a little bit more at the next meeting, but falls under the Spectrum Act. We've done a bunch of cell phones in the past, so this is the same process, but in this area, in this instance, the tower is a water tank owned by the town of Ashland.
All right, so if there's no other reports, the last thing on our agenda is last thing on the agenda is the meeting minutes of August 10th, if there are no other reports. I had gone through these previously, but had no changes.
Neither do
I make a motion that we accept the minutes as written of the August 10th, 2023 meeting.
Second?
I'll second that.
All right, and a roll call vote.
Deepa Venkatai.
Anna Tesmanitsky, aye.
Marcel Verhona, aye.
Catherine Jersey, aye.
And Tricia Kendall, aye. So those are passed. Any other notes before we get a motion to adjourn? All right, motion to adjourn at 10:20. Is there a second?
I'll second.
And a roll call vote.
Deepa Venkatai.
Anna Tesmanitsky, aye.
Marcel Verhona, aye.
Catherine Jersey, aye.
And Tricia Kendall, aye. All right, thanks, everybody. We'll see you on October 12th.